the General Purpose School Fund, Fund 141 for fiscal year 22-23. Last week, we reviewed Fund 177, which is the Educational Capital Project Fund. We also reviewed the Cafeteria Fund, Fund 143, and when you folks get done reviewing that, if you guys see any items that you want to have, you have questions on those two first funds that we went through, or requested changes, we can do that. Just let me know that on Thursday, and I'll be happy to go through that. I think it was Mr. Holden, or one of you guys had a question about the uniform line this last time about in the cafeteria fund. I checked on that. That vendor that I told you that was current up until this week, they changed the vendor, and the reason we didn't spend any for uniforms out of that line item last year was because that was during coming just out of the shutdown. It was one of those we were just trying to keep people paid. We didn't we just used uniforms on hand, and that was the reason for the absence of purchases out of that line.
Makes sense. Sounds good. Thank you for the follow-up on that.
Before we get into what I was going to do is go through, we'll touch briefly on revenues. However, can't get deep into revenues tonight because simply just like it was this time last year, I've yet to receive my BEP estimate for April from the state, even though it was due to us from the state April 6th. Still don't have it. Very well would be a good chance that we won't see it till May, like last year. I've already emailed them.
May, the first week in May?
First week of May is when we got the April estimate last year.
That's right.
So that will be a discussion. Next year, be a discussion with the board, is I pulled the private act for budgeting for the county, and whereas right now on the calendar, this budget is due to be delivered to the county finance office by April 26th, I believe. The private act says it can wait till May 15th to be delivered to the budget because, of course, our joint health and ed meeting is late May. So that'd be a discussion I'll have with the next finance director and, of course, this board when we begin budget cycle next year. My thinking is I don't think the state's going to improve on getting numbers anytime faster. It might be better to have this meeting at the beginning of May, where that way we actually have hard numbers from the state, because that's the majority of our funding is BEP. The other thing that I'm waiting on is, because it's reappraisal, the state has to certify the tax rate for property tax. They haven't done that yet, so hopefully in the next week or two, the county will receive that. So basically, I've got estimates in here for BEP, but based on our actual for January and growth, that I know that we've got growth so far, and I can project some growth, but basically 75% of our revenue, we're waiting for the next couple of weeks before we can even get those hard numbers.
It may be a little bit different next year anyway if they pass the new funding formula.
Correct. Then we'll have TISA.
And it will be.
Hopefully it'll be better. But we'll spend a lot of our time tonight on the expenditure side, and then my hope is have some. And once again, this budget, just like last year, just like every year, there's going to be some slight increases up and down with revenue and expenditures as we go, with the commission. Before we start into the numbers, I asked Dr. Sullivan if he would basically give just a synopsis of what we've seen in the schools growth-wise, because as we prepared this with Mr. Spurlock, if there was ever a theme for this budget, I think Dr. Sullivan's going to explain it to you. It's going to be focusing on SPED and ESL, and inflation.
He'll leave you without a mic.
All right, good afternoon. So just a couple of things to go over. Most of the documents Doug had given you, I gave you one of those, and this is just one that has a paper clip on it that just has the BEP portion of course, what we're still funded with right now. This is just one of the 8 pages of the Blue Book, and really there's just a couple things I wanted to kind of bring to attention. One of those being the very first line, the regular education funding and regular education teacher. You guys have seen over the last couple of months, we do a staffing report every single month. And on those staffing reports, we are looking at each class, each school, each grade to make sure we stay within these levels. But it's not only the funding that's important, this is also the class size maximum that we can have. So in K3, we're looking at 1 to 20. Then we are looking at regular ed for 6 is 1 to 25. For 7 through 12, you actually can go a little bit bigger and you can be 1 to 35 with your average of 30. And so those are the numbers we are looking at when we are looking at some of these averages. On the next couple pages, this is just for your information. Felt like it was essential for you guys to see where we were asking for positions. I know it's small and hard to read, but we'll go through these in a little bit more detail here over the next couple hours. First, you will see elementary required, and those are just positions we need to meet class size maximums. And then you'll see middle school, and then we see high school. On the back side of this, and again, I'm just giving you a very quick overview because we'll go over this in more detail, you will see ESL on the last page. You'll then see fine arts. Then we have special education, and then kind of some school counseling looks and CTE teachers. So I felt like, in talking with Mr. Bodery, it was essential for you guys to see what we're asking for is truly going to what these schools and where the schools are needed. Now understand also, though, when it comes to student enrollment, this could shift by the time next August gets here. So we may have to move these just a little bit, and we do that continuously. We moved 2 teachers last week for next school year. But as Doug talked about with numbers, so we've added over 2,000 students from last January to this January. Part of those, I asked Mrs. Edwards to run how many of our English as a second language students. And so ESL, when we look at ESL students are general education students first, just like a student with disabilities is a general education student first. However, we provide a lot of extra support if a student's English as second language outside of a regular classroom teacher. So if we have a student who needs ESL services, we're providing them with a regular ed teacher for whatever the content they may need. We're also providing them with an ESL teacher, and the state maximum is 1 to 35. And so when we look at that, Ms. Edwards ran that number for me last Friday. Since August, we've added 1,225 ESL students.
Did you say that number again?
Yeah, 1,225 from last August. Now, I'm sure we've also lost some, so it's not a complete how many did we add and subtract, but just students that we have enrolled from August at the beginning of school year, 1,225 ESL students.
I want to follow up on that. There's a lot of mobility with that, so you'll have some coming in and some replacing them. So that's the reason why we have that static number there.
Yep.
Transient.
Absolutely. And it is of course in our north end of the county, but we are seeing ESL numbers across the county that are just continuing to grow. Those students, of course, that is not anything that deals with academics. It's just an extra support that we have to provide and we need to provide to make sure that they gain language acquisition and academics. And so that just kind of sets the tone as we're talking about growth. It is looking at over 2,000 students where almost 60% of those students have more than just your general education needs. Yes. The other part of that is students with disabilities. So as a district, we serve right under 10% of our students in our county are identified as students with disabilities. That can be anywhere from intellectual to health impairment to autism to gifted. And so there's a wide range where we're talking about students with disabilities. But if we're looking at adding 2,000 students, for example, this school year, then just sheer 10% of that, we are serving an additional 200 students, students with disabilities. And of course, that is spread out through all of our schools. And so it's not as simple as just, all right, we have 200 new students that need special education services. Let's put 4 teaching positions in the budget. We have to look to see where students are. A lot of those students. Yeah, go ahead. It is. We have. Yes. That is a lot of, it is growing a little bit, but we do a very nice job, especially in our elementary schools with our response to intervention. And so we have a lot of students who in the past may have qualified for academic needs, who we serve them through our academics that we have, and so they don't qualify because we recover some of those gaps. But we sit usually between about 9 to 11.5%. State average is somewhere around 14 or 15, so we're under state average for sure. The other part of that, and that's not certified positions, but it'll be in classified. Many of our students that are moving in have one-on-ones in their IEP, and so that is an expense to where we try to make sure that we transition and make sure that a one-on-one is actually needed before we grant that position. However, a lot of our students are moving in with some severe issues, so that it is obvious from day one we need one-on-one support. And that, I think we had over 25 that were hired from September 1st until right now. That's a huge portion that is just needed to support the needs of students that are moving. And so the big thing is, of course, we continually talk about it. The growth is absolutely not paying for itself when it comes to supporting our teachers and our students.
And in that case there, in that positions you're talking about, these are primarily funded from local funding because the
Correct.
state doesn't. The only thing you see that really we have to stay within the guidelines are your in-classroom instruction. And then, of course, special ed, same thing. But the other things are suggestive. Now, we've been very fortunate because we have had support from our local funding body. And we know that stuff like librarians, things like, translators, instructional coaches, all those things are necessary in order to have a successful school system. So that's some of the things that when we take into account and we look at the budget, that makes a difference in terms of what it looks like from the previous year.
I don't remember the ESL number being this high before.
No, it is definitely not
We
been
know
as
it's
high as it
like
is.
this, or
We have a lot of organizations, especially on the north end, who are helping sponsor. And when you have those that help sponsor, then you will also have, with the lack of affordable housing, families who are doubling and tripling up into a house. And so you may only have one revenue from property tax, but we may have 3 or 4 families that are living in a household together. And so technically they could also qualify as Atlas if they wanted to, because they're doubled up in those, but that usually doesn't happen.
can we tie a number to what this additional cost is? Because I'm sure this is like a man, really.
Well, it's like he said, it is 1 to 35. So, and this is another conversation that we've got to understand too. There may be 35 in one class, but 20 in the other, and we still don't qualify for a whole one. But you can't just put 55 in a classroom. So it can be like that. And this is not uncommon for large systems like ours. And as we're growing, we're more likely going to hit over 50,000 next year, students enrollment. That's what happens. It's something that, probably 95% of our state LEAs don't have to worry about. But that 5%, the metros, the Chattanoogas, the Knoxvilles, us, Clarksville, Montgomery, yeah, we do. We have to worry about those things.
I thought that would be a good way to segue into this, just to see just really what's driving this budget. And as far as the cost, Mr. Young, we'll actually touch on the cost of that. This ESL, marked increase, it's in there. As we get through the details, it's going to be in there to see. New format this year, at least new format for us, just like the other two funds in front of you, you have a printout from a new budget software. Once again, it's a new budget software for us, but the rest of the county departments have been using this for a decade, and we'll be utilizing this going forward. It's the same as the cafeteria fund and the capital project fund. As you can see, the first column is actual audited numbers for last fiscal year. Then it's got the original budget for the current fiscal year 22. Then the amended budget with any amendments up through the end of March that's already passed. Estimated current year to date, what's been spent so far or collected so far. Then it's got the department request, and that is on this first page, it's the revenue, along with the second page is revenue in the request. Once this board, it says mayor board recommendation. Once again, this is budget software for the entire county. So where it says mayor board, that would be the school board, is once you approve it, and then it will move on to the county commission, the health and ed and budget committee, for their approval in that final column. And at that point, then we'll export it up into the comprehensive budget for the whole county, and it will be voted on by the commission. As of note, the first 2 pages, as you see on that second page, under department requests, bottom line, total revenue, and once again, that is a conservative estimate, because I do not know what my property tax is for my growth, because we're waiting on that from the state. And with modest increase for growth for BP, I'm arriving at a conservative beginning number for revenue of $449,623,780. If you look over to the amended, on that third column, the amended budget 2022, that is our currently amended revenue for the general purpose school fund of $429,647,220. Now I want you to turn to the very last page of this document, please. And then we'll go and talk about everything in between. I want you to see just the bottom line, because a lot of folks will say, give me the bottom line. If you notice on that very last page, that's your final, on the expenditures, look under the amended budget 2022. We have an amended expenditure budget of $444,326,636. Okay, that's the amended budget for this current fiscal year we're in as we stand at the end of March. We've got an amendment that you've approved that's going through the commission Thursday night. That's not on there yet. Look to the department request bottom line. That is the increase of requests in this original budget for expenditures, $490,270,359. Now, what does that do? You see an increase?
About a 9.4% increase.
Yes, $45,943,779 increase, but, from budget expenditures. Currently, this fiscal year that we're in now, we have a budgeted deficit. Now, this is a budgeted, because, we'll talk about this more. There's going to be variances, but we have a budget. If we brought every dollar in that's in that revenue budget currently, and we spent every dollar out that we had budgeted expenditures, we would have a budgeted deficit currently as we stand today for this fiscal year, $14,679,416. With the budget that we have in front of you for next fiscal year, as it stands right now, it is a budgeted deficit of $40,646,635. And that is containing everything that we're about to discuss, okay? I just want you to know the bottom line where we stand right now. And once again, I'm going to get my BEP in, I get my property tax in. I've already added around $15 million for increased sales tax in the revenue that you have right now in front of you for this next fiscal year. So there is a lot of growth in sales tax, but let's see what we can do going forward, okay? So let's start, unless anybody's got a question on, the other thing that is different this year, you have in front of you this right here. If you recall, in the past, there was on the access program that was used for the budget, we would manually enter the positions for each line in that budget document. This is the same thing. This is showing, it's a 3-column showing budgeted positions, not filled positions, but budgeted positions by personnel object code for the last 3 fiscal years, including the projected 22-23. You can see we're going to have a request of 180 new positions. So the difference between the FY 21-22 middle column and FY 22-23 at the bottom line is 180 positions growth, okay? Once again, similar to last year, just a separate thing, but you can now see by line item what we're about to go through as far as new positions are doing to each line. So let's go ahead and turn to the budget improvements page. You have in front of you, we'll talk about personnel first, okay? And then we'll go to the non-payroll stuff. But it's obviously salaries and payroll is the meat of our budget, just like any school system. So let's discuss this first. And I'm going to let the other assistant superintendents and Mr. Spurlock, of course, chime in any time. We'll touch on things of these as we go along. If anybody's got any questions as we go, just stop me and ask. Okay? In this budget that you just saw with the $40 million deficit, budgeted deficit, this is, and we'll start right here at the top of these budget improvements. You have the certified degree and experience races. These are your certified staff, your teachers, and your certified leadership and management staff based on our current pay scales. As a teacher gains a new degree or they have experience each year, they go on a step. The cost for those steps with our current and in the open positions, like obviously we got some open teacher positions. For those open teacher positions, I put in there, and this has been this way for many years here, is an open position. I would budget for a teacher with a bachelor's degree with 5 years experience. So that's what I've got in the opening. So when we look at all those step increases and degree changes for next fiscal year to live up to the promise of what we have on our pay table, our current pay table, that amount to do those steps for the certified is $3,339,465. That's what I've got budgeted for those step increases. Move down to classified employees. That's our hourly people, our degree or our salaried classified as well. As you can see, they too get steps, and there's less of them than there is the certified staff, but they still get those steps based on our pay plan. That amount for their steps would be $425,683. So before any additional pay increase is given, just based on our steps and the degree changes, those two together are $3,765,148 increase right off the bat for those steps. Below, and I set this because the 4% for a pay increase for both certified and classified employees, we did a 4% this year because that's what went in the governor's budget for the current fiscal year. The budget has not passed yet at the state, but I've verified that what's in there for a pay increase for the BEP covered positions, which we have several hundred outside the BEP funded positions, is 4%. There's, just like we did this year, we'd like to strive to give everyone, including the ones outside the BEP funded positions, the same pay increase, which would be at 4%. Pay increase for everyone in the GPS fund, all the funded positions, $12,902,668. So for the total for the step increases and the 4% increase, that would be $16,667,816. Once again, that can change slightly as we go through this process. The county commission, or I'm sorry, the budget committee just met last Thursday to discuss, raising the contribution rate for our classified TCRS employees. The reason being is we budgeted this year a contribution. This is what the school system pays to the state for our employees' pension, 10.16% of their salary. That would go up to pay for those employees' pensions. We budget 10.16%. The county commission voted to change that, to bring it down slightly in 2019, because they said, hey, it's still higher than the actual. Now that extra that we give, it doesn't just go to the state. It goes to state, and it is reserved for Rutherford County schools, for in case the rate goes up. Well, guess what happened this year? You got it. And it actually went up to the exact 10.16% that we're contributing. So my point being is, should the commission decide we want to increase a little higher, then I'd come to you saying, I think that, you know, that would be a reasonable idea as long as it wasn't a ridiculous amount increase. But, you know, being that I can see that amount going up in the future, that could be something that would change.
What determines that? What can it determine?
Actuary, based on rate of return for the plans, investments, longevity, based on an actuary saying, you know, this is what they're seeing in lifespan.
What about volume?
That too, yeah, more people coming on.
We've seen a lot more people retire.
The state has seen, well, and you can speak for that as far as,
Yeah.
have you seen a lot of support staff filing for retirement?
Oh, yes, that's really call all the time. From TCRS, making sure that they're filling that out and filling it out properly. So they're calling, and they're calling year in advance even, just to go ahead and check to see, you know, if they're eligible for calls.
I know I've seen a lot of retirements come across my desk.
Okay, so there's what I have right now with an increase. We've got some other enhancements below this that we'll talk about as we move down this page, you know, that came from the Salary Study Committee with recommendations.
Can I interrupt you for just back to the 4%? Excuse me, can you clarify that 12.9 million? Is that the total cost for 4%?
That's a total cost for the 4% with the FICA. And
Okay, not including, that doesn't count any BEPs, that's not eliminating what the BEP would pay, or the governor's?
No, ma'am, that's on the
That's just
expenditure
total,
side.
right.
Yeah, the revenue side, what we will get, because we have so many more funded outside, plus we pay additional salary, you know, above that minimum and everything, we're nurses are a great example.
Yeah.
You know, 15 point whatever nurse is funded, and we have one for each school. Guess who's going to pay for that?
Right, exactly.
Yes, ma'am, yeah. So the revenue that we're getting from the state for that is not anywhere close to what, once again, it's going to go back to just what we discussed with the SL and SPED. The locals are going to do the lift.
Right, thank you.
Okay. We'll move down into the additional positions on the request. We'll start with certified. Go ahead.
And as you were looking at these, just wanted to kind of go over some things. We don't just, so we take teacher or principal requests in December, actually November into December. So that's how long this budget process starts for us. We start, Mr. Bodery sends it out November, December, to where they send out principal requests. Our individual departments follow exactly that same thing, and then we work together for the next couple months to kind of put that together. We don't just add positions just to try to add positions. We've been able to transfer 37 positions this school year, and so that is at the number Mr. Bodery was looking at. He's got the per unit cost of $67,703, and so we've transferred, and I hate to put it in financial terms, but that's what we're talking about tonight. We've transferred about $2.5 million in positions from one school to another based on enrollment. We are just to a point now where when we look at enrollment from one year to the next year to the next, if we were to move somebody, we'd be putting that position right back the next year, hoping we made it to the next year. And so as you look at these numbers, they don't equate exactly to how many we need because we've been able to transfer quite a few of them.
I'll jump in there and say that for you. Since Dr. Sullivan's been here, we've done a great job of looking at where we were overstaffed. And that's kind of a difficult conversation to have because we primarily over the years, once you were hired in, you stayed there. So kudos to the instructional department looking at and how to repurpose that into where our need is.
But there's got to be an ending to that. Eventually, we're going to run out of teachers to transfer.
We're
So
there.
we're there, aren't we?
Yeah.
We're there.
That's it, and we're going to have to hire new people.
You could have, depending on enrollment, maybe 2 or 3. But as far as like we
That's
were able
not
to
very
do
many,
last year,
yeah.
to where we could transfer when we opened Plainview and
Sure.
do all of those without new positions. Grandfathering is a great example. Grandfathering, I appreciate the board doing that because that's what's best for our students, but that does come with an increased cost. For example, we have to leave positions at Rockvale and then also fund positions at Riverdale till while that grandfather is occurring. If by some miracle Rockvale's growth slowed down in the next 3 years, we could get those
could
positions
move
back,
some.
but that would require a miracle, I think. So.
But basically, we think we're about at the end of that
Yes, ma'am.
little perk.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Moving on down through these additional positions here on the growth. As you can see, and I'm going to let Dr. Sullivan discuss quite a bit about these growth positions for certified, because like Mr. Spurlock said, the instruction department worked very hard, and then he worked with me and Mr. Spurlock. We looked closely at, once again, what do we need? You know, we don't want to just to balance a budget, say, okay, we'll try to make do without this and this. It's like, what do we actually need with all this tremendous growth that we're seeing this year? And I don't think it's going to let up. We had this discussion the other day that, you know, city of Murfreesboro is one of the main destination points for the entire nation for U-Haul. I mean, people are flooding into this community.
20 a day, according to Greg Jones at the Chamber of Commerce.
What was that, Ms. Charlotte?
20 a day.
20 a day of families, yeah.
That's what at the Laverne ribbon cutting, that's what he told me. Maybe more now. That was, what, November?
So if you would see Mr. Bodery has the 12 and a half elementary positions, and this should line up if you go to the document that had the BEP on the front and going back to where we had the elementary positions that we referred to at the very beginning. So it has this BEP page, and then it goes to the next page that has pretty hard to read smaller numbers. But I want you to see, so here are the positions. You'll see what the K3 average, and that's where I have it highlighted. So K3 average is supposed to be 1 to 20. You will see the average as of March 1st right beside it. So we'll take Barfield, for example. They were at 20.76. They needed a position. And so that is where we have a budgeted position. You'll go down and you'll see then the next group of students in Barfield and any of our city schools, Barfield, Rockville, Buchanan a little bit. Those are going to fluctuate just because parents can choose. They're dual zoned, and so we may have some students who show up one year and the next year they're not. And so that's one we always watch. You'll see Blackman Elementary, same thing, 20.36. They need an additional one. You'll see that third one is K3. They're still at 20.36, but why is there not a position listed there? We were able to transfer a position from another school that was open, so we were able to remove that. And so that's where you'll see down through ones that don't have a 1 beside them. We were able to, as over the last 3 months have occurred, find a position that was being vacated by a teacher somewhere else. That position was no longer required at that school, so we were able to move it. And that gets us down, as you go through, I still have some elementary concerns. David Urey, you'll see their 4 or 5 average is 23.85. David Urey continues to grow, even though we have Rocky Fork Elementary, which is growing as well. That is a higher poverty school, so we watch that a little bit closer. When they get close, we want to go ahead and get a position. Rock Springs Elementary, you'll see up above, they continually grow as well. And then Stewart's Creek Elementary, even with giving them 2 new growth positions and not adding any additional growth, they're still at 19.78 in K3, and they can only be 1 to 20. So those are our concerns. If you'll go to Mr. Bodery's page next, we have middle school. Any questions on elementary first? And again, these fluctuate a little bit. I look at these again. We just had another staffing report. We took a position from Christian Elementary and transferred it. Actually, it was open. We transferred it to Riverdale High School. So truly, anywhere we can find a position, we'll use it where we can. Any questions on elementary? All right, next you'll see middle. And we were able to do quite a bit with middle school. So we originally had 9 or 10 growth positions. We were able to get it to 5. You'll see Rockville Middle, we really needed 3 additional positions. Middle school's a little different. 6th grade is still at the 1 to 25 ratio. 7th and 8th is the 1 to 30. You'll see Blackman Middle School, they've added 54 students as of March 1st. So they're sitting at 29.23. We know based on their growth, they're going to go over. So we wanted to go ahead and allocate that position with the teacher shortage. So we didn't wait until August. You'll see those Rockville Middle positions I mentioned. We were actually able to transfer some open positions from Oakland Middle School, and so that helped us. Instead of hiring, we were able to transfer and still keep our mini school structure in place. Stewart's Creek Middle was over in 7th and 8th grade. Knowing that Stewart's Creek Middle is going to continue to grow, we needed to go ahead and add those positions and allocate those. Rocky Fork Middle School, we continually need to build out their 8th grade, but it's not a priority right now. They are growing, but not at the rate, so that's a position we're just not funding, not recommending to fund for this school year. That'll be later on. Then you see concerns. Blackman Middle, even with their growth positions, will be at 29.23, and then Christiana Middle is at 29.88. And so they're close. And so we have taken that original 10 that we were looking at to 5, just by transferring positions. Next is high school. In high school, we are actually asking for 16.5. For high school, that's a unique one because we're experiencing growth in so many areas. You'll see Rockville High School, we have 5. Stewart's Creek High School, we have 5. Riverdale here, we have 3. We've actually been able, as I mentioned, that one Christiana position, so that gave it a 4th. And then we're waiting on another one, I believe, that'll give them a 5th as well, that we can allocate. And high school depends their course offerings, all kinds of different things that we're looking at. And then Smyrna High School and Laverne High School as well. We looked at this year having an accurate count of how many English positions, example, how many math positions did we have at each high school. And so that gave us an idea of how to try to organize some of these. And that got us to the 16.5 positions for high school. And that is where we have been seeing the biggest amount of growth lately, has been middle and high school especially. All right, next we have on Mr. Bodery's sheet, we have 11 virtual school teachers. So we funded virtual school out of ESSER 2 to see if it was a sustainable model. That has been a sustainable model. We are using our own teachers for 3rd through 8th grade, and then we are still contracting out for high school because we would love to have our own high school teachers, but the expense would be would just be astronomical for all the courses we would need for a small 250 student enrollment. Plus, we would be hurting ourselves even more by pulling teachers from our comprehensive and our regular high schools to pull from that. So we have worked with our vendor to get that cost down. We've gone from, I think, $3,700 to $2,600 per student by using our own math teacher at the high school level. But we do have 11 positions that are transferring from ESSER that are, if you will, growth positions because we opened a new school with the virtual school 2 years ago. You'll see growth ESL teachers, that is the 1 to 35 ratio. That 16 gets us by with what we need right now. That doesn't include anything in the future, and that's kind of what these are. That's the only concern, is that this gets us with what we need as of right now. You'll see growth fine arts. We do have a little bit of wiggle room here, but because these are not necessarily required class size ratios, but that is something this board has done a phenomenal job in supporting. And I think Mr. Sprock, Dr. Halford, at some point we received some news today that is continuously supporting our fine arts programs and the great work that Dr. Halford and our fine arts teachers do. We have 11 as part of her overall improvement. We asked her to do a strategic plan as well. And so this was part of hers to start looking at additional dance programs at our high schools. Also to start looking at additional art and music for our elementary schools that have gotten over 1,200 students. And they may have 1 music and 1 art teacher. They need an additional one to even be able to meet their rotation, so they need to make sure every kid actually gets art more than once every 11 days. And so those are things that you will see. Again, these aren't required per BEP that we do this. That's a suggestion, but we have them in our budget right now to support what we've been doing with our fine arts. CTE is an area that we've actually increased funding with based on just how we made some small tweaks to our schedules that allowed us to get a little bit of extra funding for CTE. We're only asking for 5 positions this year. That's an area that I know will continue to grow, but as we are looking at the other areas, we've supported that very well the last couple of years, CTE, and those positions are on those on the actual second page of the document that I gave you that had that BEP at the front. You'll see where those positions are. And we meet with all of the principals to go over what they request and work with our CTE department for those. So I'll kind of stop right there to see if there's questions, comments.
That's funded a little bit different too.
It is, yes.
It's not funded by ADM.
Nope.
It's funded by full-time equivalency in terms of what the teacher is actually covering. I think, once again, the instructional department and the attendance department in the last 2 years went back and cleaned up some of those things. It wasn't anything intentional like we normally have in high school. Some high schools were just having a first period, and then they would have what's called intervention period. They'd call it different names. Well, what they were doing is they were removing that teacher from that period, even though the teacher was working for that period. So, and we weren't getting any funding for it, and it was having an impact. So what Mr. Boder did, Mr. Dr. Sullivan did was went back and informed them, allow that CTE teacher to keep their own kids. So that was another cost savings on their part.
That also went back, I just reminded me about that, went back to when we requested and this board funded additional position for attendance. It was the first new attendance clerk in 10 years. And it's paid off dividends greatly with capturing things like this and more in BEP funding.
I have a question about the CTE teachers and how we determine how we're going to compensate them. We know that our CTE teachers, many of them are coming out of industry, and some of our schools have struggled to staff some of those CTE programs. How do we determine how we fund those? Is that something we do? Is that the state? And do we need to make some adjustments to some of these? I mean, we have like principles of manufacturing where they're using plasma cutters and welding equipment. I mean, this is heavy duty engineering equipment. For somebody to come out of industry to come into the classroom, they're going to take a drastic cut in pay. I think Mr. Holden can speak to this, maybe some. He and I have talked about this. So can this board look at making adjustments? Is that something that's already been done through this process?
One of the things that they're doing now, obviously, is that really helped out a lot is our EPP program. Whereas it used to be when they came out with a degree, if it wasn't in the teaching area, they'd have to go to the university and pay $6,000 to $8,000 or maybe more to get. So we've cut that down. Another thing, as we start looking at our career and technical education classes that are aligned with industry standards and are providing, and quite frankly, that's one of the things with this new program, the new funding program is, SHOP as we once knew it is becoming more advanced. So some of our teachers currently that are working for us, not all of them, but some of our career technical education teachers are doing a dual enrollment, and they're actually getting funded through the college, and they're getting funded through us. I look at it all the time. I mean, it's growing exponentially, but it requires us offering courses that are aligned with what we call high-paying careers. The investment, and quite frankly, when we see this new funding form, excuse me, that will be coming forward, if it passes, those students will generate additional funding. And the reason why they're generating additional funding is for the same thing that you just mentioned, because of the expertise of the instructor within the classroom.
So, and I appreciate that information, and I had an opportunity to talk to Senator White and Representative Rudd over the weekend about this new funding model. We know they're going to tweak it over the next couple of years, if it even passes this year, which they're hopeful that it will. But reality is we won't see that funding for another year because that funding model is not going to be implemented. So, but I do have concerns about CTE classes, equipment that we have, that we don't have teachers in those classrooms. And so, and part of what I'm hearing is, from students, parents, teachers, that when these professionals come out of industry and into the classroom, they're taking a huge cut in pay. Some might be okay with it, but how do we make those adjustments, or how do we assess what we're going to pay those teachers to bring them into the classroom? I mean, they obviously know they're getting a cut in pay, but we need to be able to compensate some of these industries more than what we're able to currently.
Yes. One of the things that came out of the Salary Study Committee, and it's in this proposed budget, is if at the very bottom of the certified personnel new, these enhancements that we're discussing, if you look at the very bottom of the certified personnel new, right above budget improvement summary, CT occupational teachers year 5 to 9 increase. Currently, we would start someone coming in from private industry with those certifications at year 5 step, on the certified. This proposed budget would lift those people to year 10.
Okay,
So there is, in this proposed budget, there is funding placed in there to do that, to start them at that 10-year step instead of 5.
okay.
For those certifications that they're bringing in. Still probably going to be less
We're going to be
than,
below what they.
but I think,
Yeah, so as they were coming with a fifth-year master's, they'd start at 51,814 and going down. You'd be looking at 58,102 or 68,38.
So and maybe this is a Dr. Anthony question. I know that we've looked at other departments where we have hard-to-fill positions, and I know you have a pulse on this. So at what point do we determine that the CTEs positions are hard to fill? I mean, they're critical, right? Because our students have to have 3 years of their CTE program to graduate, correct, by state law?
That's right.
So we know that we end up in this labor issue, and I know it's across the board, but at what point do we determine it's critical, and when do you determine we need to add additional funding, or what measures do we take to ensure we're recruiting good candidates for these and getting them filled, these positions filled?
Instead of being on a signing bonus, we added this year where everybody would, on the hard to fill, and it really helped us with the SPED population. We had ESL, which, as they just presented, was a big area, but we added a lot of areas under SPED, and then as well as ELA. We looked to see which one will give the person a bigger jump, and this time it was the year's experience for that industry, because we know some of those people are coming in having made in the past, with their many years, 6 figures, So we knew that if we could start out at giving them, 5 years is great on the scale, but how can we make that more enticing where they automatically know 10? And we talked about it as a committee, that when we're looking at classified employees, we're always looking at a cap of 10 years coming in. So that gives them that opportunity to move up on that scale depending on their degree and their certification. So the move up on the scale was more profitable and more of a visual for them as they're looking and they're inquiring about our jobs, as opposed to the signing bonuses, which are more appealing on the non-career and technical coursework.
Wonderful. Okay, I appreciate the information. Thank you.
I do have a comment on this ESL growth. It just floors me, the percentage that we've increased there. At some point, would it not behoove us to maybe look at an ESL academy and combine some of these high schools, the resources from the high schools and the middle schools?
As far as making a one location
where all your teachers are in one location, you don't have to have a teacher here and a half a teacher there.
I mean, I'm sure you're talking about integrating them within a larger high school.
Or, we're just going to start thinking outside the box, I think, here, and figure out is there a more cost-effective way of doing this?
We couldn't segregate them, but we could integrate them into a larger high school where if they're only but here's quite frankly, and Dr. Sullivan can speak on it. Well, there's very few areas that do not have a robust ESL population, and it's primarily, it's down in our northern end of the county because it borders Nashville, much closer to Nashville. But it's really, we can really pinpoint where our growth is occurring with our ESL population. It's that Laverne, Smyrna kind of area. Our biggest thing is what works for us is to have a robust program where they can exit out. And you might want to speak on that because you've had a lot of experience with ESL.
So when we're looking at ESL, part of the TCAP umbrella is the ELPA assessment, and in Tennessee, that's called the Access Assessment, so we give that in February, and students have to show language proficiency, and for language proficiency, we are looking at their overall literacy score, and for students, we exit a great deal of students at the elementary and even some at the middle school. Where we struggle the most and where as a district, this is we have a facilitator job posted right now that this board approved that we are looking for high school. We have a lot of, we call them LTELs, our long-term ESL or English learners, that at the high school level, we don't exit as many as we should. We have a lot of students who are coming to us with interrupted education or SIFE students, and so that is where some of our growth is that we probably could have. We have, Dr. Perazio does a great job with that program as well, and a lot of our ESL program, but that's an area that if we could really improve upon when you talk about an academy or doing things that area that we could definitely do some things with. And an area that most people don't talk about a lot that is growing in ESL where we're seeing our biggest number, we have allocated more ESL positions to Stewart's Creek Elementary, Middle, and High School than anywhere else in the district this school year.
You know, getting back to that too, in high school, being a former principal in high school, it's not uncommon to see a kid come from Guatemala, maybe be ready for high school, but hadn't finished 5th grade. I mean, this is the reality that we face, and it's really difficult for, you know, you may have a point there. There should be something, maybe a transition academy, you know, where Dr. Sullivan talked about, that's where we're seeing our biggest problems because, you know, they may be unaccompanied too.
We've done a really nice job developing curriculum the last year that is by our own teachers for our students that are in the program and have been exposed. For our newcomer, that's what we're working on right now is our newcomer English. And then a huge change, and they've seen it in the North End a lot, is that we a lot of times just think of our English as a second language students as having a Latino background. We are even much more seeing Middle Eastern. We have not seen a lot of Afghan refugees yet, but I sure we will. And something Mrs. Hall and I talked about this last Friday was, do we expect to see Ukrainian refugees as well? And we expect to see that over the next year. It'll take several months to get here, but we anticipate that as well.
You talk about transitioning. I assume that means when you teach them enough to be somewhat fluent in English.
Yeah, what we find is our English ESL students are pretty good at picking up just the social vocabulary. And so a lot of times, and that's PD we do with our teachers, is that you may not think that they had the language deficit for academics that they truly do because they can have such good conversation. My background at Harris Middle, we were about 40 or 45% English as a second language, and that was, you would have conversations with the students and you'd really have to remember, all right, academically, they don't have the vocabulary because we have not exposed them to that. And so you have to be very careful. We're supposed to make sure that we do at least 60 minutes of ESL work a day, but in order for them to be exposed to vocabulary, they have to be around peer groups and be exposed to the curriculum. They'll never access the curriculum if they're never exposed to the curriculum.
So it's not like 6 months and you're done.
No,
It's much more complicated.
3 to 5 years.
Oh, yeah.
3 to 5 years. If I may speak to that, since my end of the county is where the concentration is. Earlier this year, I worked with a nonprofit in putting together, and I kind of consulted some with Dr. Sullivan, putting together an after-school virtual tutoring program for our ESL. It is before the governor's budget right now. Hopefully there'll be a couple of phase-ins and that'll be approved, but we're waiting to hear back. And it's basically a company that will meet with the students virtually in the libraries after school, every day after school. So the first phase will be ESL, but it will be Spanish, and the second phase, of course, will be Middle Eastern or Arabic. So hopefully we'll hear, I haven't heard anything in probably a month or so, but hopefully we'll hear something from that because I think that will help immensely, and they can stay after school and or do it earlier. You know, we were at Smyrna yesterday, and they were speaking about all the one-on-one computers that they had in the what we used to call the library, but they call it the what do they call it now?
What are you talking about?
The library. They called it the
Media
Center. Yes.
Yeah.
So,
Media Center.
yes. So I'm hoping that something like that's going to get approved through the governor's budget, but just like everything else with the budget, we're still waiting on to see where it stands. So is this is an after-school tutoring for our English language learners? Yes. At what grade?
And no cost.
Right, no cost to us. It's going to be funded by the governor. So it will be an after-school program at Laverne and Smyrna high schools, those two.
And something else to bring up with ESL is that we think of the larger counties having a larger EL population than we do. I'm looking at the state report card, for example, for Knox County. Knox County has about 8,000 more students than we do. They're at 7.9% of their student population is EL. And this, of course, is last year, so we've added. Last year, we were 12.7%, so 5% more than a county that has a lot more students than us. So we are, even though we're the fourth largest, we are probably the third most diverse.
Ms. Sharp, can I ask, will that ELL program require any funding on our end? No. No. They'll utilize our school, so there will be no administrator or anything of ours?
No,
Okay,
no. They will provide someone at the location.
okay. What is the number?
That's the pilot. I believe it's Breakthrough Nashville.
How difficult is it to find ESL teachers?
Extremely difficult.
Especially Arabic.
We battle most, and I say that term on purpose, with Metro Nashville for our EL teachers. Metro Nashville for many years required their teachers to have a dual certification, especially at the elementary and middle level, so that they would have to be certified in EL. And so when we are recruiting against Metro Nashville, and they have because they have many more years' experience, they have a more robust program than we do. I don't necessarily believe it's more efficient or effective, but it is more robust with resources than what we have.
Well, are there any, and I don't want to use this term to make teachers think I want that position, but are there outside companies that provide that ESL service that if we have problems, you can hire?
We met with Proximity, and they had a little bit of ESL, but that wasn't an area that they staffed like some other areas.
Just curious.
And then Empty Shoe added a few years ago to help us 5 virtual courses that can help a teacher to get that certification so that we could, benefit from that.
And we have at least 2 people, if not 3, in our EL department that adjunct at colleges and universities to get more endorsements for us to try to help.
We have a
But it's-
phenomenal ESL. Yeah.
We're now moving from ESL into SPED. We're back in about the middle of the certified personnel new, and it starts off with the 14 growth teachers for SPED. And Dr. Sullivan, do you want to just jump right in and talk about
I'll
SPED?
keep
It's a
going.
big part of this budget for this type of personnel.
So special education is funded by option code, and with option code, it determines the needs of a student, and those often don't match up with the needs what their IEP may show to what the needs we're seeing in a school setting. And so that's unfortunately how it is funded. That will change a little bit with TISA. That would be more beneficial to us as a district to get more funding for those positions. So we are looking at 14 additional certified positions. One of the findings we've had from NIET, and we realize this, if you'll recall, we asked this board to approve an NIET needs assessment, and we're just about finished with a lot of that work. But sometimes you need an outside group to tell you this is what's going on, even though we realize that. It just gives you a little bit more. When we look at our special education staff, and nothing against our current staff whatsoever, we technically have one position that's supervisory for special education, and that's Kate. She's the coordinator. Our next senior person in our special education department is an 11-month spectrum or gifted supervisor. There's not another supervisor. That's truly it. And so what we are looking at is repurposing a couple positions and then having an additional, and I actually think this will be a position we'll be able to move and transfer over and remove this position, another way to save. We are looking at doing a restructuring of our special education department. So we have a coordinator, 3 supervisors, 1 supervisor that handles elementary, 1 that handles middle high school, secondary, and then 1 that can handle OT, PT, speech language, all of those different things that sometimes just kind of get left off and somebody is stuck. Along with that, we're looking at having underneath each one of those supervisors more of a specialist that can help be a liaison to serve as a leader. So if you have somebody that has a behavioral issue, there's 1 contact person. If you have an issue that is academic, you have 1 contact person. Because right now Kate is trying to run the department and solve every single issue, because truly that's the way we're structured. And so you'll see a couple of these, the SPED supervisor, and again, I think that's a position we'll probably be able to move and transfer from within. You'll see that certified liaison. Right now, we have 2 liaisons, and we're asking to move those from an 11-month to a 12-month more specialist or supervisor position. We are looking at 1 speech language pathologist for growth, 1 additional behavior specialist, and that kind of covers the board meeting that will be yes. Like we are actually for the supervisor position, you're only seeing one that's listed, and I still believe we're going to be able to additional position. We have it, but we have one person for time special position and a specialist doctor. One person hiring that would be supervisors without having to ask for an additional position.
Thank you. And special education, like our English language, we're seeing, did you give us those numbers, or can you provide them to us this evening?
Yeah, so if we are, I'll pull the actual numbers. The only thing I mentioned earlier was about 10%, so about 200. That is fluctuating every single day as well. The biggest area we're seeing, again, is the one-on-ones. And so that is our biggest area. We're pretty well staffed when it comes to certified positions in our schools. We overstaff our schools. I know our schools and principals don't believe that, but when it comes to what BEP funds, we absolutely overstaff. For example, if we were looking at, I can just go back to the middle school I opened, Rocky Fork Middle School. I believe I had 5 special education teachers. By BEP, I probably should have had 1.5. I could not have imagined running a building with a half of a structured setting teacher and 1 interventionist, and to meet the needs of an inclusion classroom, that we needed all 5 of those to meet the needs of the IEP, but that's not what's funded by option codes of the students. And so we do staff that very well. You do have, I believe it is on that second page, maybe in the third page. Yeah, it's the very last page, right about middle. It says total fine arts, and then SPED is right below that. And you will see where we are looking at adding those positions. And again, this may fluctuate just a little bit based on where we actually need programming and what students move in, but you'll see kind of where we are looking at the students needed.
This is something, in my opinion, we need to get back in front of our federal reps. And, you know, because that's before COVID hit in 2020, I was there, and that was one of the things that we were talking to them, because they never funded. The promise was to fund it at 45%, I believe, but they funded it about 15%. So there's that huge gap there that, you know, that they're not even funding and haven't funded for decades. So that's really something that we need to get back in front of them and press for.
Now, maybe Mr. Spurlock can answer this question, because you're pretty informed on the new funding model. When we no longer can say that's what the BEP recommends or has afforded us, will that drastically change for our special education services? I know money will fund each student per their need, but how are we going to calculate that?
It'll be driven, yeah, it'll be driven by a student. You know, the student will have the base, every student will have the base, and those multipliers, as far as the special ed is concerned, as we go into the more intense, option 1, 2, 3, you get funded more for that particular kid. And of course, what he just said is a good example of how this fund will actually meet the needs of those kids outside of additional funding within what the structure we currently have, because 5 kids could generate enough money to fund 1 teacher.
Yeah, like to right now, I just pulled up options 7, 8, 9, and 10 are the disabilities that require the most intervention. A lot of times we'll have structured setting or maybe even some medical needs. BEP funds at 1 and 8.5, 1 position for 8.5 students. A lot of those students need a lot more support than 1 teacher. For consultation, for example, a lot of this gifted at our high school level funds 1 position for 91 students. And so even meeting with a kid twice a year would take 1 position.
Right.
You take 1 kid, and he and I talked about this, ESL kid, we just mentioned ESL. ESL kid could be Atlas, could be special ed, and by the time you get through all those multipliers, a kid could generate $22,000, 1 kid. Now, if that kid leaves us, that's $22,000 is going to be leaving with the kid. Right. Mm-hmm. That's correct.
That's it.
And quite frankly, if this new funding formula comes along, I'd say those charter schools will be helping us out. They'll be looking at that.
We have, of course, the last couple things here, you know, just a couple, there's, you know, 2.5 grow school counselors and graduation coaches. And also, this is a note.
Jump in there real quick,
Yes, sir.
okay, because I can say this, okay? I think it's time for this board to take a long look at graduation coaches. It was instituted in Georgia years ago. They got away from it. If we're really going to have kids college ready and career ready, it would behoove us not to take that position and make it into an additional counseling position, a career counselor. And quite frankly, that's what guidance counselors are supposed to be doing anyway. They're supposed to be working with those kids every year, make sure that they're meeting their needs. And they're overwhelmed. I think, Dr. Sullivan, you would agree with that. If not, I'll tell you to agree with
No,
that.
absolutely, they are. That is part of why
They're
we're
overwhelmed.
adding that 612 school counseling supervisor, is to have somebody with that background that can advocate for what are the needs of our school counselors.
So, Mr. Spurlock, are you saying graduation coaches may not be as necessary as
I
career
don't
coaches?
think so, but here's what and I've had this discussion with Dr. Sullivan and Mr. Bouldry. I think you would have to transition that, but not every one of our graduation coaches have a counselor background. In fact, very few, if any, have it. Now, that sounds to me a little bit, maybe we put the cart before the horse. Now, we have a great graduation rate. However, when this new, and I hate to bring this up again, when this new funding formula comes along, there's going to be some accountability and some outcomes expected. We can do it, but we got to make sure that we are specifically putting that funding in the right place to make that difference in that child's life. So I'm just throwing that out there, and Doug, you and I have talked about it before, and of course you were looking at the money part of it. I was looking at the ability to get some opportunities for kids. But I think that's something that, that's up to you guys, that you might want to take up in the future, looking at that. Now, you would have to, obviously these are tenured employees, and quite frankly, we're not short of teaching positions in terms of needs. So that would be something you would have to transition out.
And that is, if you look at that next portion, we have 2.5, we have a bigger need than 2.5, but when we're looking at what are the biggest areas that we have to support the classrooms that are required right now. And looking at the K-12 averages, ESL, special education, I don't say this lightly, my wife is a mental health counselor, but we had to fund the positions that were there first is where it came from. And to show you how we're, again, the local picking up some at a BEP, yes, we understaff what BEP says at the high school level, but a lot of that is looking at the totality of the district. To generate a position for elementary guidance, they still call it, even though it's school counseling, it's 1 per 500 is what BEP funds. We have McFadden, Kittrell, Plainview. We have multiple schools who should not be, according to BEP, have a school counselor. And I could not imagine any school without a school counselor. Mm-hmm. And that's just kind of balancing the entire district of looking at it. We did look at making sure once we hit 2,500, a high school getting an additional one, which is why you see Stewart's Creek High School and Rockville High School having an additional one proposed for next school year. And then we have in the next year to bring on the additional high schools to try to bring those on in our next budget. And you'll see that it says, I think it says look at 23-24 school year in the notes.
Career coaches or graduation coaches, I know when we were doing the Manufacturing Leadership Council with the mechatronics at Oakland, we found guidance counselors / their position really didn't know a tremendous amount about the CTE / manufacturing side, things like that, because they've never been exposed to it. So I'd like to see us look at making sure our career coaches and people are very familiar with the CTE courses that are there and can help them with a career. That's all I just think we've seen a need to come together and get those folks. They do great on academics and that, and I'm sure, but but we do need some help in that area of coaching these kids as far as their career we're talking about.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think if we're doing, for CTE, if we're putting them through these courses and we're preparing them or introducing them to a potential career, would be helpful if we could get them access to good information so they know what comes next. And you know, the youth science program that we use here in our system, that's a really great tool for our CTE teachers if they're not already using them to get familiar with and work with their students, because it's an aptitude, but it's aptitude to, Mr. Spurlock can talk more about it probably, but or somebody else. But it really is a great tool for our students to be able to see, this is what I like, this is what I'm good at, and then this would be good careers. If you've never...
As we're teaching these young people, that individual could be a liaison between industry and the school. Because we know there's a little bit of a disconnect between our industry needs and our system, and there probably always will be, but we need to know what our industry needs or our folks need out here and try to place young people that are interested. So
I think that is she adding one more coach this upcoming year, career coach, from out of her own funding, out of?
We've actually applied for a grant to fund 2 more as well.
More?
Yeah, we've asked and initially been approved for 2 more.
Right.
How many graduation coaches do we currently have?
Each high school.
Each high school has one.
Yep. Even our alternative schools.
Have one.
Our alternative schools have graduation coaches?
Yeah, because when those students transfer, they serve multiple roles, but we have that as well because they have to. Yeah, they're jack of all trades. And you mentioned the career portion of it. I agree. That's part of where you struggle with the secondary school counselors, because if they are serving 600 kids, they don't have that individual time to be able to meet with them. It's register and move the best you can.
That's where I think the transfer from a graduation coach to a career coach would be, it may be, so like Eagleville is a very unique school. They also have a graduation coach? I mean,
They do.
they have a remarkable graduation rate, so
All of our schools do. Yep.
so for that one, for that position at Eagleville, and I would like to see, and they have 2 APs? Do they have 2? 3 APs?
They have 2.
2. Could we not convert that graduation coach to an assistant principal for each grade band? That way, I mean, they do more testing at that school than any other testing in our system, right?
As far as all grade bands.
I think we had that discussion due to the fact of they have a large elementary, and you're being pulled.
Yeah.
So that kind of really dictates help there.
And that kind of gets us to our next point, looking at our admin portions. And so these, of course, are always at the will of the board, as you guys see. For AP-wise, we asked for 3.5, I believe. Rockville High School being over 2,500, and the continued growth over there. We are looking at a part-time potentially for the virtual school. That's something that is the will of the board as well. That is, they have 1 principal and looking at ways to support them. We also have looked at Smyrna West and Daniel McKee. Their APs are currently paid part-time as a teacher, part-time as an administrator. They are doing full-time administrator work. So advocating for that portion of it. And then Rock Springs Elementary and Stewart's Creek Elementary are still sharing. They have 1 AP each, but then they have a split between the 2. And they are well past the point with being over 1,200 of them both to have that additional 1 not being split between the 2. And that's our 3.5. But we can, of course, anything you want us to look at, we can look at.
So we're adding an additional assistant principal at Rockville High. How about Stewart's Creek High?
We don't have that in there right now.
With their population, do they need it?
I think they're still on the cusp of they're not there yet.
They are not at 2,500 yet. They will be very quickly, but they're not yet.
They're not there yet. At our growth rate, will they be there by the time next year starts?
Probably. Probably. I'll pull them up right now. If you give me a second, I'll tell you what their enrollment is.
What is Smyrna High School's enrollment?
About the same.
22,
22,
2208, I think.
maybe, or something like that. Close to 23.
close to 23. How many APs does Smyrna High have?
4.
4?
Every high school has 4.
Has at least 4. Okay.
You were looking at Stewart's Creek and Agora, this doesn't take necessarily growth, 2312, and so they're more than likely going to be higher than that, in Smyrna High School, 2256. And I know that it's, the Laverne Smyrna High School population is the most, but Blackman and Stewart's Creek's demographic is changing very quickly as well.
The whole county's changing quickly. So
Yes.
I think the only one who has breathing room right now is Siegel, right? Siegel High has some room.
So are we going to look at changing that graduation coach at Eagleville to an AP?
Are they part-time right now?
And they're full-time, so they have 210-day contract, I believe, is a,
Talking about, they do all graduation coach, right?
that, in reality, they're serving admin duties as well because they're needed.
So I would like to see us switch that and make that, because graduation coach, and I may be completely out of my lane here, but understanding some of that dynamic and having talked to teachers and principals out there, I think a graduation coach, if you've ever been to an Eagleville graduation, it's kind of remarkable. I don't know that that's an appropriate position for them.
I agree.
might
I
benefit
believe
from
their
AP.
principal has asked for that as well. It's something he's interested in too.
Okay.
So I think he would support that.
I'd like to see that change, please, in this.
So it basically change 10-day contract and an index. What would their index be? Would it be elementary index,
I would imagine the one that would be moving would move to a secondary index.
secondary index? Are the other two primarily, what are they on? What index?
They're on secondary index as well. So maybe
Fine,
something
now
we need
you
to
only
look
got
at.
over like 120 kids in high school.
Yep. We'll need to look at
That's
their
going to
indexes.
come off not looking very fair.
Yeah, we'll need to look at their indexes.
All right. And that, of course, brings us to the 101 FTEs that's in this request for certified staff. We touched on a couple of the enhancements that's in this budget that came from the Salary Study Committee. Of course, we've already discussed the CT occupational teachers increase to step 10 instead of step 5. That would also include any current CT teacher that's within the 5 to 9 year range you got it, yes, up to 10. The other items that came from the Salary Study Committee and was recommended by this board to be placed in the budget, the change to remove EDS or EDD grandfather clause in the certified pay scale. That was the $476,523 impact. This was the big one was the addition of $500 per year on certified pay scale for years 16 to 20, where it's basically flat in those years, to add an increase for each of those years on the BS and MS pay scales. That, of course, with a cost of $796,645 for current teaching staff. The other last one is the update, and then forgive me, I'm going up instead of down, but update the administrative index to attract and maintain administrators. In front of you is a 2-page document. It's the Rutherford County Administrative Index as it is currently. And the next page is the proposed index that was recommended by this board to be placed in here. And as you can see, the differences in the improvements on that index with the APs being increased, as well as several of the grade levels of the principals and the supervisory staff. Instead of having the years, if they're in supervisory roles, that just being flattened to when they come on to the supervisory responsibilities, they assume those indexes automatically. Note at the bottom of the recommended, we have a lot of specialists that are not administrators that would receive a specialist index. those specialists would remain on the current, as recommended by this board, would remain on the current specialist index for non-supervisory positions. And of course, the cost for migrating to this new administrative index is there on your improvements, which is $321,639 for the current staff that we have now. And that is...
You flattened it and you increased it. Is that?
Yes, sir. That's right. But that encompasses the certified increases. Does anyone have any questions on those last things before we move to classified, or do you guys need a couple-minute break? You tell me before we go into classified.
I'm okay. You okay?
Okay.
Everybody's
Okay.
good?
Yeah, we're good.
All right.
I do thank you all for finally taking those years off of that supervisory staff, having come in on the old year thing. Took them a while to figure out that that wasn't fair. I've been working for the county for 20 years, and they put me at 0. Laura Harper, God love her heart, changed that. So, yeah, that needed doing. That is excellent.
We're going to move into the classified personnel now, and we'll, of course, go the meat of this and this rounds out the 79 of the 180 additional requests for positions in this budget. We'll move right into the instruction side, which is the meat of the request for classified, and it's going to be like deja vu. Dr. Sullivan's going to take us through ESL and SPED again.
So we will look at our ESL educational assistants first. We chose to look at certified positions instead of classified positions the most for ESL. We felt like that was a bigger need. And so we're looking at 4 additional ESL EAs. We are looking at 1 growth library EA, and so that is Plainview Elementary has actually met their 450 students to generate that position back in February, I believe. So that's that position. The next one's the biggest one, and this is, I want to take a second to explain. So we have SPED/behavioral educational assistants. So this is 2 things. One is part just our one-to-one growth we are looking at. I think last year we budgeted 8 to 10 special education EAs, and that has not been anywhere near enough for what the needs that we're moving into our district and just to meet the needs of our students. So we are looking at 25 of those. Again, you hope that you don't necessarily have to fill all of those, but we need to budget like we're going. If the trend continues like it did this year, I envision we will. The other portion is just an idea that we have had in trying to work with our elementary principals. So elementary does not have any type of setting for alternative placement for student behavior. And actually state law allows you to have an alternative setting for 1 through 12. I don't believe they've ever gone back and changed kindergarten, and that's the reason kindergarten is not included. That's the only thing we could come up with. And so we looked at adding, I hate to call it an ISS EA, but for all intents and purposes, it's a place to work for behavior for students in the elementary setting, because right now the aspect of let's clear a room and the rest of students having their classroom instruction disrupted, when we also know that that student who is disrupting needs extra support. We have to give, at least we felt strongly, we have to give our elementary schools something to be able to start supporting them with our student behavior. We've looked at some options to have a very small alternative school at a couple different places for elementary. That's just some logistical things we need to look through and have some board policy and decisions around placement. But as big as we are looking at maybe 1 kid per school, and I feel like this would be a better use of our funding and our resources than having an alternative school right now, unless it was something that was very, very unique that we needed to address. And so that's where you see these other 26 as 1 per elementary school. We may need to have some discussion around potentially looking at our bigger schools versus our smaller schools, but that's where we started with the budget to start discussion.
One of the things that I was thinking about as we was going through is we've seen an uptick in behavior in elementary, but I sure hope that this doesn't stay this way. You know, and my concern here is when you go into a recurring cost and you get to the point where the behavior, how do we transition back out of that? you know, it's almost like building a prison. We can't build enough prisons because you build one, it fills up. So we probably, and I understand this is like, right now, this is like hot right now. You got to have to stop the bleeding, but there needs to be there needs to be something taught. There needs to be a program taught. If they're not getting it home, then we're going to have to teach them appropriate behavior. And I'm not talking about special ed. I'm talking about gen ed. And I think what we're seeing now is a reflection of that year and a half or whatever where we were out. And unless we take hold of it, if you've been to any store or anywhere, you're seeing behaviors outside of school. It's going to be a difficult task.
I think you see it even as you mentioned, whether you're at youth sporting events, not having referees, because referees don't want to put up not just with the parents, but with the students. But they had a year and a half of interrupted without any type of social peer groups of how to act. And I think that is exactly what we were saying.
It's definitely, I believe me, we've gotten reports and I've seen it and it's real.
Can I ask on these, I share in your position, Mr. Spurlock, and you and I had conversations in the past about starting some kind of program as opposed to an alternative school, like a next step where the kids can stay. I think we were talking secondary education, where kids could stay on their campus in some kind of a remandment program. On these positions that we're creating, does that mean we'll have to have facilities exclusively for them? Like, we were touring high schools, thank you, Trey, the other day, and they had small, what used to probably be closets or workrooms for these very small contained spaces. Will we be looking at doing something similar like that for our elementary school students?
Yes.
Okay, so we're talking a true ISS type environment.
Yeah, and again, I don't think long-term it's a solution. It's a solution to try to bring normalcy and teach norms of expected behavior back in schools. Is
there a way, and I don't even know where to start, I'm with Mr. Spurlock on this, where we implement some kind of curriculum, where we're teaching some kind of behavior alternative like they do at Smyrna High School. They have a great program there. Ms. Maxwell spoke a lot to Dr. Sutherland about it, so I regret that she's not here to talk about it, but something like that. Is there a curriculum or something that we're going to be introducing in this process?
We can look at, we don't have one yet identified.
Okay.
Or even training for these
Yes,
people.
because we
special
also want to make
training
sure
for
with,
the people that are going to be in these rooms.
it is definitely a need, but we also want to make sure that anytime you're talking about curriculum, especially with social emotional, there can be controversy. So we are very hesitant on what we look at, but we also know our students need something. And so that is part of why we brought in those 2 counseling positions as well, because that should be their background that they can help support us. As our instruction department, we're, for the most part, general content specialists and instructional leaders, that the mental health aspect wasn't an area of support. And so that's what we were hoping they were going to be able to provide.
Okay. Dr. Anthony, when you do exit interviews or questionnaires of our teachers and principals, is behavior a major reason why many of them are retiring early or leaving? Can you give us some insight into that?
It is occasionally mentioned that a suggestion is to work for the elementary behavior items, especially the young.
Okay.
Dr. Sullivan, with the Title I schools, I know that there's a very small percentage of the funding, and then they've kind of taken a lot of our options away from that funding. I would think that would be an area that would be perfect to involve our parents and the students and our teachers in after-school programs, and perhaps coach the parents too.
I think you're spot on. We have some schools who may have some challenging behaviors, but they, through their title funds are allowed to have interventionists, and it doesn't delineate that you have to use academic interventionists. So we have some of our title schools who have hired behavior interventionists that are, yes, they help during the time that a student has an episode, but they also there to support that student with the appropriate behaviors. And I think you're spot on. Those schools have done a great job, and that does involve the parents. But you're right, a portion of our title funding has to go to parent involvement that we often struggle to
But it's
to
like
use.
2%, right?
Yep, we
It's
struggle to
very
use it.
small.
All right. I believe the other last 2 there was just the SPED bus attendants for just additional growth routes, you know, for SPED bus EAs, and then an Arabic interpreter for basically what we've been discussing all along with ESL growth. That completes with the classified instruction. Now we'll move into some of the support staff increases. Dr. Anthony will have these next ones here. We have the insurance benefit specialist and lead specialist. Dr. Anthony, do you want to talk about those and that certified employee analyst?
Sure. And at the last board meeting, we voted on our lead senior analyst specialist, and that position is posted, and we are going to be trying to look for a person to place them this next month. We've had a few applications that have been really good, with some even having experience at the state of Tennessee. So some great prospects there. And then we'll be bringing back to the board for our other remaining 3 positions that will hopefully be able to be approved for the July 1st budget that we'll place into our own budget. And then also expanding the needs that we have in our HR department. We have 1 person over the certified employees for the district and 1 over the classified. And with the increased need on licensing and additional just pure volume of hiring employees, we're going to be reallocating some of the positions in the department. You know, we've had to do a lot of expansion on our recruitment, both certified and classified. And so this person would help our 1 person right now trying to do licensing and onboarding and the hiring for all of the certified for the district.
Could I request that that person be certified? Do you know what I mean?
The pay for that is currently, and that may be something the board may have to discuss, is currently a salaried position.
Yes.
And so if we wanted that to be a certified, then they would need to be on our current certified pay scale.
I think we need that. I really think we need a certified person in that position.
Yeah, we can.
They need to know all about teacher licensure from day 1. And it's hard.
Oh, yes.
It's very difficult. And when Dana Nichols left, there went our certified person, and you know, we need a certified person in that position. Sorry, Doug.
We'll post it that way. I agree. I think they already had that.
It would be so
insight.
much easier on you.
Similar
I am
language
sure.
also, and then since the state's been working remotely for the last 2 years, where there are very few people, 5 doing all of the state license for the whole state, that every day we try to get a hold of somebody, and it's not very easy.
Are they still working virtually?
Yes,
Oh, yes, assessment is as well, a large portion of them. It's great.
yes, and then
Well, I would like a certified person hired in that, please.
I'm for that. And then also, you know, this year we have been able to contract out for our larger high schools to have additional help with their acuity rate that we've been giving weekly reports on for our schools that have a higher number of needs of one-to-one nursing and different things like that. So we were asking that we may be able to keep those 3. All the schools have been very grateful for that, and that's really threw them a lifeline this year especially.
We're talking about the additional LPNs that have come in to help support the nurses.
That is correct.
Okay,
And we're going to keep
we're
those.
going to keep them.
Yes.
Okay.
You know, at first we approved it through December.
Right.
And then the outcry was, please don't take them away. We're able to actually maintain that, and that helped to stop the nurses leaving, especially at
Do we need more?
that will cover our 6 very large high school comprehensive schools with that 3. 3 is what we're gathering from the principals and from the nursing staffing that is needed. The 3 is
Just
working.
the 3.
Yes,
You
along
don't
with
need
their,
more.
along right now, as long as they can maintain their
You will come and
full-time.
tell us if you need more.
We will tell you,
Okay.
yes.
They need more.
Just an observational
They need more.
that I've seen over the last 4 years is that everything is going through finance. Things that shouldn't be going through finance. if you get a certified analyst, you will still continue to have your current employees, right?
Yes. So you're saying like,
What I'm saying, let me finish up. What I'm saying is things like the insurance, once this gets written on the dotted line, this should funnel through your department.
that's correct, we'll be hiring the staffing. That was what was approved the other night.
Right.
Yes.
And there's other things too. You know, they're calling Doug up, hey, can I get another custodian? Do I qualify for another custodian? Or how many hours? That kind of stuff needs to go through HR. That doesn't need to go through his office. You can communicate with him in terms of what is it, the fiscal impact gonna look like, but that needs to come through your office.
Okay.
Okay? I mean, what I'm saying is, as we get larger, and this is no indictment on anyone. I think Mr. Sandvig was a kind of a close, you know, everything. He was kind of like the Wizard of Oz, and he was the one behind the curtain. Okay, I think we've got to utilize the assets that we're funding in the appropriate area.
Okay. So what we usually do
Maybe
is,
off task. You don't mind telling me that, okay?
well,
I think it makes
I
sense.
think that helps. That helps us
Yes.
a lot.
so what we do is now that we, if there is somebody that does call us, we do make sure that's something that's approved by the appropriate departments before it's
And
approved.
it's not anything you've done intentionally, it's just something we've always,
Growing pains.
Okay.
While we're on nurses, could I, Doug, there was a bill that came through the legislature that was passed about the nurses and paying nurses professionally. What was the end result of that? I've kind of lost track of that with everything else going on.
The current bill right now for that, is that what there's one currently that's, I forgot what committee it's going into now that's slated for. I want to say it was finance, but it was it would require every LEA in the state to place their teachers on the certified pay scale, the same as the teachers like we used to have at RCS. We still have we have the grandfather ones that are still on there. The fiscal impact of that would actually cause, speaking with Tennessee County Service Association, that would actually cause in a lot of the rural districts either A, property tax increases, or B, which would be more likely, they would actually lay nurses off right now under the current BEP funding. It goes back to what we've discussed in this room. I mean, we're ahead of the curve with this. Is when you get funding for 15 point something nurses and you staff nurses like we do because we need it, the funding from the state's not there. The burden falls in millions of dollars on the local. At this point, that bill is a bill. It's not passed.
It's passed the House, not the Senate yet.
It's not passed the House. No, it's gone through committee, but it's still in the committees. It's not passed.
Like I said, I was following it at the beginning, but
Yes,
I've
ma'am.
kinda
It's
lost
still
track of it.
there, but it's not passed. But it would be, like I said, I don't foresee it passing because of the fiscal note this year. Now, that could be something that they could revisit if they fund, because under TISA, I believe it's 1 to 750 that they're going to start funding. That would actually give us funding for what we've got right now. Now it goes back to, what is that salary going to be that they have? Because when we looked at redoing the salaries of our nurses, our new nurses, not the grandfathered, our salaries that this board set for nurses for the new salary was actually higher than Williamson County school system nurses. At the time, they have improved that some since then, but we're still highly competitive with our nurse salaries compared to a lot of the, because I mean, it's always, we've had this discussion, go to Williamson County, but is that a true is that something we should be comparing all the time for Williamson when it's $1 million?
Williamson has.
Yes, I mean, that's like the police. The sheriff has the same discussion, but.
You were right on track with that. Some of the colleagues that I've been around, the rural counties, even with the 1 to 750, They said if it goes to, on the certified, that they would definitely have to reduce.
Because we're looking, because a lot of the rural counties, I know this is not off topic, it's just, but it is what it is. It's you know, we're discussing 2,000 growth, 16 miles from here in Cannon County, they're closing 3 of 6 of their K-8s at the end of this school year.
And as they
That
should.
is very true across the state of Tennessee. You get outside the growth counties,
They've got like,
you're seeing massive loss of student population.
yeah, in the school.
That's going to impact. They're not going to
running the whole
raise
school, yeah.
taxes for a shrinking school system. They are going to go to the expenditure side and start reducing.
Can we use their buildings?
Yes, the charters can.
I don't think we want them.
Yeah, I don't know if we,
Two of their school board members, I'm not sure we want to do that.
they were built, most of them were built in the 50s, their school buildings.
Yeah, well,
Way older than Oakland, Riverdale.
Yes, sir. That was,
As compared to ours, I mean, we've got a few that were built in the 50s.
yes, they're,
And just burden.
they were
His
the
heart
hope.
dropped when you asked that question, Dr. Sullivan. Doug, can we get back to nurses for just 1 second?
Yes, I was going to go back there. Go ahead, ma'am.
We have done, we made changes. We've taken a lot of criticism for those changes that we've made. Can you cover how many nurses do we currently have? How many vacant positions do we have? And if I'm not mistaken, we added LPNs, the 3 we just spoke about, but then we added additional hours for the clerical position, for the clerical work at the beginning of the school year. Did we not?
We also
Support
added,
our
yes,
nurses?
ma'am, and
Yeah.
also in this budget, this proposed budget is over 1,000 more hours of PRN for the RNs, PRN hours. So we've doubled their PRN pool hours. As far as what we have now for our nursing, we have in that line, we have, with this increase, we currently have 55 FTEs. That includes the one PRN staff. Then you see going from 55 to 59 FTEs, that's the 3 LPNs, full-time LPNs that we're bringing in from the contract to bring in-house. And then we'll have the 1 FTE increase, and that's going to be those additional PRN hours. That would be the equivalent of a full-time 12-month nurse. So, I mean, what this board is putting in there is allocating quite a bit for additional nursing staff. And as far as open positions, do we have even one nurse open? Even with our new pay scale, we don't have one single nurse.
So we're
position open.
fully staffed, we've increased positions, and we've increased hours, so that we can argue that the change that we made
We're
did
still
not
at
hinder
mark.
us. We're better
still at
off now
market.
than we were.
Yeah.
Can we talk a little bit about
They
those
might disagree with
hours?
that, but
What?
I think the nurses might disagree with that, but, because it was my understanding the nurses got their pay cut, but the occupational therapies and our coaches and things like that were in the same pay scale did not get their pay cut.
Nobody got cut. The current employees, no one got cut. It would be a new employee coming on. But we did not cut one single current nurse.
What you're saying is true, but the pay was cut from what was before.
For the new
So
employees.
it's the new
yes,
employees that are
ma'am,
coming
but
in,
what
so
that
we're asking them to do more with less. And it's the nurses, it's not the occupational therapies or that they're a speech therapist or whoever else falls in that line. I mean, it's arguable that our nurses, beside our teachers, were the #1 people who kept our schools open during COVID.
But we didn't reduce our existing nurses, and we added support to those nurses.
We still need more. I mean, you're talking about a school with 2,500 kids in it.
Did you not just say we're adding more hours?
We're adding those 3 additional LPNs for the comprehensive high schools. And that was one thing that Ms. Spurlock and I, we met, and Dr. Anthony met with the director of nursing. One thing that came out of this was, and this, once again, this kind of shocked me, that the School Nursing Association for this state, and they didn't have a model. If you go to any other type of healthcare environment, home health, hospital, nursing home, they staff based on production as far as, patients, and not just patient, but the level of a patient. Because we all know we have students that might say, I've got a cold, I'm going to the nurse. I might have another one with a trach.
Right.
So you staff in any other environment, healthcare, based on the severity of the patient and the volume. The School Nurse Association had nothing.
I don't think that we could do that, because I think every year it's something different. If you have a clinic, you've got history and everything, but our patients or our students change every year.
Correct.
So I don't think that that's something that
They actually did it
That they
for
could-
us. They
You had
actually
an
are now.
acuity level.
Yeah, they are now our nurses are now looking at staffing based on
Acuity level.
what acuity level and patient load, you know, from what they're seeing at their, that was first.
What about this specialist that you have here? No, you've got supervisory index. We're going to raise the charge school nurses a little bit.
It's another enhancement
Okay.
for the nursing staff. The
Yeah.
supervisors are actually going to get that supervisory specialist index because they're in a
So
supervisory
their
role.
salary will go up.
They were already getting paid additional days as
Uh-huh.
a supervisor, so now we're going to add on to that
Okay.
increase to go to that index.
And how many of these do we have?
We have 4 charge nurses.
4? Okay.
And they traveled, they divide
They
up.
traveled.
Yes, and when we went through that process to learn the responsibilities that they carry, it was unbelievable how much they do. And all of our nurses, and I would agree with you, I visited several schools where the nurses had laid out, you know, some schools have a heavy load and they had insulin patients and they had this schedule and it's all hanging on the wall. So I would just ask that as we continue to, and I don't have to say this, but I'm going to say it, as we continue to increase our student caseload and special education needs, that if there is a need for a school to have another additional LPN, that you guys would bring that back to us immediately. And then I want to just clarify, when I spoke with nurses last time we went through this process, they said that they have a ton of paperwork at the beginning of the school year. So we still have those clerical hours. Are we going to have those clerical hours this time?
Those were temp staffing. If they see a need, then we will work with them on that, yes.
We
But
do have a flexibility for it.
we could do that with some ESSER funding if need be, if there's some one time that we can step up. And with the hope is as we migrate out of, and I understand just the sheer volume of increase, but a lot of, and as you know, a lot of what drove this fall's paperwork was contact tracing and
Yes.
additional, all that. I hate, you know, that we, next fall, maybe, we don't have that.
No, we can all hope, but, okay,
Would, if it needs it, we'll revisit.
thank you.
So do we track the activity in a school with a nurse? So we can tell how many cases we have and, okay.
We do now. That used to not be the case, we do now.
I started to say it'd be easier to justify somebody if you had a caseload and all the information and data, so.
And they did that for us, so yeah.
All right, unless anyone has any questions on those items, then we'll move on down into maintenance, and Trey and Mike can talk about their request for employees.
Well, I'll just go ahead and jump the annual stipend and do transportation while I'm speaking. Level 6 maintenance growth was 2 positions. Level 5 maintenance tech helpers, 2. Preventative maintenance HVAC crew level 4, there's 2. Salary construction project manager growth, there's 1. Transportation router receptionist increases, we're going from a pay scale of 4 to 4.5 to better suit their actual responsibilities. Level 1 IT support techs, we put 9 of those through the ESSER funds, and we're going to be bringing 3 each year for the next 3 years over to the general purpose. This is allowing us, by going 1-to-1, all the additional devices we've had, and it's also going to add a tech at all the high schools in an additional day. So that will help the high schools and the additional devices. Transportation, new bus routes, that's 7 gen ed buses. Bus routes for special ed, that's 6. Special ed buses, that's been our largest growth this year, especially with our Atlas increase, Atlas and SPED. So these additional students that are coming to us that are needing these special education teachers and EAs, they're also coming with IEPs that require transportation. So that falls on us. And then we've got the rate change by the contract that was put in there, a 4-year contract of 3%, which is $1,305,279.
Trey, can I ask, how many total employees do you have in maintenance?
70 what, Mike? I think it's right at 70. Hold on, I can tell you. Yeah, maintenance personnel, we will have 70 with these 6 additions. We have 64 currently.
And are any of them stationary at any of our schools, or do they travel to all of our schools?
They all come here in the mornings. They're assigned, depending upon their skill. Plumbing, they don't have assigned schools because we don't have enough. It's on a work order basis. HVAC techs are generally assigned to a school. They have multiple schools. So when work orders come in for them, for that particular school, there's a certain individual that's familiar with that equipment. Part of what these helpers do on our larger schools, we have additional things that they do. Like when they go to do a work order, they will actually get on the roof because some of our units have rooftop filters. Our custodians are not comfortable getting up on the roof, so we have our maintenance HVAC techs do that. The PM HVAC crew is something we started last year. Sometime in the past, and I couldn't tell you exactly when, but the changing of the air filters got transferred to our custodians.
Right.
Our custodians are doing well enough to keep the schools clean. I'm not being derogatory toward them. There's just not enough of them for this new assignment. So we recommended a couple of years ago to gradually begin with a preventative maintenance HVAC crew, and we got 2. We've got it started. And basically, we're hoping they get to every school at least a couple of times a year to change the filters. While they're there, they can look over, do basic troubleshooting to see if there's an issue there that maybe a custodian would not catch, to help us with some preventative maintenance, cleaning coils, vacuum AC units out, and that sort of thing. It's been a good program. We actually have caught some things early and been able to fix them before they broke. So these 2, our goal is to eventually get to 8 so that we have 4 on one end and 4 on the other. We still go north and south, but 4 on the north end and 4 on the south end, which would basically allow us to get to most every school once a month, is our ultimate goal, but we're gradually phasing this in.
Okay.
Does that 70 include level 5 and level 6?
That's everybody. That's everybody.
Do you know what the current custodial caseload is? How many custodians do we have in the system, do you know?
Doug can probably get that number quicker than I can.
Every school we
Positions.
visited yesterday.
The positions we have, right now, we have 273.8 FTEs, and that was with increase that we gave some additional increase for when Laverne Middle opened. They got 1 this year, an additional one. So we don't have an additional 1 increase in staffing positions for custodial personnel, so it's sitting at 273.8 for next fiscal year beginning.
This is how many we fund.
That's how many fund.
That's
many's
not how
open?
many we currently have in our.
No, ma'am.
No, ma'am.
No, we have over 30.
We have 30 plus openings right now.
Wow, okay.
We have, and that's one thing when we started looking at the pay, we currently pay better than any large district, any district in this whole area.
Are other systems having the same problem with their custodial staff?
Not the contracted ones.
Yes, other districts are, well, Murfreesboro City is terrible time keeping people. severely understaffed.
We pay a lot better than them.
You say contracting, like outsourcing and bringing in an,
Williamson,
They have,
Davidson, and Wilson.
Williamson and
all-
Wilson have gone to an outsourced company that actually, they don't have a custodial employee one. They have
I
a
don't wanna
company that comes in
outsource.
and does it.
No.
I don't want to outsource. Sorry.
My wife's experience, not mine, I could have never done it, but my wife's experience with outsourced people is it's just another kind of set of problems. They used GCA in Murfreesboro, and they finally got rid of them and opened their own because the facility cleanness was very lacking. They were using undocumented people in the schools. There was a whole set of issues with the contractor. Now, I'm not sure about all contractors, but that was the experience that she had with them.
do we have any high schools that still have custodians living on campus?
Yes.
How many of our?
Riverdale, they moved out, but they're anticipating possibly moving back in. Oakland, Riverdale, Smyrna, Laverne, Central, Stewart's Creek, Blackman, they all do.
They all have apartments.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Even Central Magnet.
Right,
And there's somebody
that's
living
been
in.
there a while, okay?
I don't disagree, but I'm just,
I hope it's been updated. I don't want to outsource. I'll put it right out there. I do not want to outsource.
we're trying everything we can to
So
keep
what
from
do we
getting
need to
there.
do to keep from doing that?
Are you volunteering to be a custodian on them?
You know what? Do you need me?
Yeah.
I'm good at it.
I think
Laverne's
each one
got-
of us would.
Each one of us would sweep.
Yeah, they got openings. We all do.
The one thing that I think we haven't gotten is with the supervisor. When we use that, I mean, I know he's a great guy, but we haven't been able to shift people around like we.
And I'm gonna step out on this law.
Go ahead.
When we go to principals and ask for them we say we need to borrow this person to go over here, and the employee refuses, the principals back them. And neither him nor I have the authority
So then,
to overrule them.
why don't we have floating staff? They're not assigned to any particular school.
If we could hire those folks, we would hire them. But right now, they want to hire for a specific school. These employees have been with us a long time, the vast majority. They were hired by the principals at those schools, so they feel like they are employees of that school. And I can't argue with them, but that's the reality that we live in.
They're very loyal to their school. They're part of the culture and climate.
We
and
have
all
had some
understand
that would go, like from Stewart's Creek, where they're just going across the street. But we have some where they won't. They refuse to.
But there is a paradigm shift now.
Yes.
I mean, Laverne High
No,
School
sir.
can't
They
keep
cannot.
staff, so.
They cannot.
So I guess the question is, can we staff them with temporary?
Well,
Because they don't have them now.
Last year, Doug hired, the board authorized this, we hired the state's temporary, it's like a statewide temporary labor pool for just custodians. And we authorized 8 positions. We went to that company and said, hey, you're the custodial, whatever, we need 8, sign us up. They could fill 1 position. They never could fill the other 7. So they don't have the employees either. Mm-hmm. When you contract with them and you call them up to say, I need them, they do the same process we do. They put an ad in the paper or whatever. They try and find somebody for that location. They could only staff 1. When that was over, we tried to hire that employee. He was, I guess he had worked enough for that period of time, and he was going to go to the house for a while.
So everybody's having the staffing problem.
Well, I mean, that was a not just custodians,
Yes.
they had other things. What I'm talking about, that the other districts, the larger districts in the area, like Wilson, Williamson, Davidson, the people they're contracting are specialized for
Yes, and there are
custodial
companies that
services.
do that. We've talked to some of them just to kind of see what their process is.
And speaking to them, those districts, my counterpart, they said the schools are clean and they don't have that issue. So it goes back to it's what the board wants. It's, we've got principals cleaning their bathrooms right now.
But Doug, on the ones that aren't getting the service, what do we do? I mean, it's kind of like 51 EAs. I'm gonna go on a short limb on that one and say, you're not gonna find them, okay? All right, so
Yeah.
what do we do?
So the one thing that we've kicked around, and I don't know if it's feasible or not, is to take employees that we have and shift them to till we got everybody staffed to see how many schools that would leave. And then if that's the case, then you contract out for those schools.
I think you would have some leave.
And I don't disagree with that either.
I think what you would do is take something that was bad and making it worse.
Don't disagree at all.
So I'm with Mr. Spurlock, though, and maybe I'm not understanding wholly, forgive me in advance. Could we not look at the schools that don't have those cultural people who are part of the family, if you will, at the schools? Can't we use a third-party service outside of, or the professional service like Doug was talking about, to just meet those needs? Or do they is it an all or nothing with these companies?
Most of these companies, it's an all or nothing deal. So if you're talking about coming in and cleaning at night, what are the custodians doing during the day? So are they just going to clean restrooms, clean up spills? Right now, the custodians do it all.
Well, like we were at Laverne High yesterday, and Dr. Hatchett said, forgive the mess, we're low on custodians.
Yes. So
In that scenario, could we not hire this company to come in and serve that school's needs?
Okay, I'm going to go back to this again. If she's 2 or 3 positions short, some of them work night, some of them work day. So we're going to take everybody and go to day. And a lot of those people that work nights are part-time people because they work other jobs and they work for us in the evenings. We're their second job.
So in an effort to
So if
keep
we
who
tell them to
already
go to
have-
days, they're not going to be able to, we're not going to get them all to days, so we take our full-time people and say, okay, we want to go to nights. Well, they don't want to work nights. And I don't disagree. I mean, if we're running a business, we tell the employees what to do.
That easy.
right.
It's not that easy.
I don't disagree.
What I'm saying is, we can't just throw our hands up and say,
I don't disagree with that
we
either.
got to doing nothing, I can tell you what you're going to get from it.
Right,
Nothing.
I agree.
Okay? So, but you can at least try to do something.
All right, so my answer, if you're asking me, is we shift everybody to the schools, we get them full, where we're fully staffed, and we're going to lose some people.
I think we would. I really
I
do.
know we will.
So you
And
need-
then we try and get outsourced for that, however many that is.
So you mean to say, take everybody, all of our custodial staff?
Yep,
Shift
let's
them
say
all
we're
to
short 30.
centralized.
Let's say we're short 30, which we are.
Okay.
You take the staff from Laverne and you move them to Cedar Grove. We figure out how to move them around so that we empty out all of our employees out of, and I'm going to say 3, 4, 5, 6 schools, however many that is. Then you outsource those 5 or 6 schools
Yeah. I mean,
completely, because with the full-time and the part-time and the daytime and the nighttime, we don't have a school that everybody works in the days or nights.
Right.
Most all schools, elementary, they have one, depending on the history of the school, they have one person or 2 that works during the day, and the rest of them work at night. They mop the floors, they empty the trash, they do all that stuff in the evenings.
Mm-hmm.
But where they're missing people, they're missing some during the day and some at night. And most of our people that are working nights by choice. Our custodial staff that works right here, when we work 4 10s in the summer, they work 5 8s. Because all of them, except one, works at Walmart as another job. They come here and work in the evenings, and they couldn't do they were going to have to take a leave of absence to work at Walmart if we did 10-hour, if we told them they had to do 10-hour days. So I told Doug, I said, hey, these guys need to work 8s. They're going to work their normal shift at night.
So what you're saying, some are definitely nights, and some definitely
Yes, sir.
night. What if we did a swing shift? What if we use, like alternating, you know what I'm saying? Here's the problem, elementary do not need a bunch of custodians during the day.
I don't disagree.
Because you're talking about double the size in a high school and now even with middle schools.
Mm-hmm.
So we definitely need that thing cleaned at night.
Yes.
And a bare crew you don't need everyone during the day.
Don't disagree. But then we would be moving daytime people to nighttime.
I mean, it
And
is
that
what
would
it
not- they
is. I
won't-
would do the
that won't
best
work.
ones. Choose the best ones.
I don't disagree.
Or
I
move
mean,
them
as
to
a
another
normal
school.
business, that's what you do.
Yeah.
You don't give employees an option, you tell them, this is what we're gonna do.
I think the challenge goes back to the same thing we see, at least I see, and forgive my ignorance, in all departments. We are a large system that still operates as though we're small.
Don't disagree.
And I love the community feel and the Mayberry feel, but we're facing big system problems. And maybe the way we tell our employees, we appreciate you, you're valuable to us, but would you consider another daytime school because we don't need you in our elementary anymore? And if they choose to go, then sort of like we did with our bus contractors, these are our routes, we appreciate you, can't do it without you, but we could always,
I have no problem, I'll come back with a plan,
thank you.
guarantee it.
I got one question though. How do contractors get people and we can't?
They can't get them either.
Well, how are they gonna meet our needs if we contract?
That's a good question. Tell you what, I can tell you what two of the outsourced.
How they
Let me finish. I can tell you exactly what two of the outsourced people told me when I met with them. One of them last week. They said, we're gonna try and hire your people to stay at their school and then we'll supplement. I no longer have to find 4. If I can get the 3 that are still there that you're gonna move somewhere else, I'm gonna post, I'm gonna hire those 3 and I've only gotta find 1.
So they wanted to take our labor.
That's exactly what they're gonna do.
Now,
It means anything, but it would probably be cheaper on us if they did that.
Don't disagree.
hey, you're not
They
paying
would
benefits.
have
I don't
retirement
see
and
that
things like
happening.
that. But then it would
They're not gonna-
be the management.
They're not gonna leave a situation where they're getting their insurance paid and things of that nature. I think there's a lot more to this than that right there.
Can we look at alternatives though, like incentivizing? Maybe we give those custodians that want to jump over to another school, maybe we compensate them for an inconvenience, or I don't know even if it's possible. I'm way out of my lane here.
Be glad to.
We incentivize our teachers and others, so maybe we can find.
Yes, you do it, you substitute teachers already.
Have we
Your
looked at,
hard-filled positions.
have we looked at recruiting at the senior citizens groups that we have? Because we have some pretty robust senior citizens groups in Laverne and Smyrna.
A lot of ours are, but don't mind reaching out.
Can you work, you gotta be 18 to work in the school, or?
Yes, sir.
So you can't work high school kids at night at other schools cleaning floors and waxing and things like that?
No, sir.
Okay.
We do have some high school students that their parents are custodians, that when they reach 18, they are working for us at night.
Okay.
They're going to school during the day and they're working for us at night.
You might could get away with an internship. I know that was mentioned when we went to Laverne High School with, what was the name of that company? It was a shipping company.
I mean, it's a lot.
They got away with it
Yeah.
because they had an intern.
Thank you. I know it's not easy. We don't mean to make it sound like it is,
Oh,
but
I know.
just.
We've been struggling for 18 months.
We have the same problem with cafeteria, right? We
Yeah.
float those people from school to school because cafeteria shortages.
We were the only cafeteria, not only in Middle Tennessee, but we can't even find another one in the state that, what we're discussing right here in training, I've had so many conversations about this, because it was, like I said, and like Mr. Spurlock said at the beginning, it was very strange to me when I assumed this role that principal after principal called me for a custodian. And it's like, it's just something I inherited, and yeah, once again, the hope as we went and got Frolin on was to transition, you don't need to call the finance guy about a custodian. I understand the financial side of it, but I promise you, I did not have a group of custodians sitting in my office to give out. So That's been a culture shift for us. But back to the way we used to do the cafeteria staffing, literally silos. That's what we're doing with custodians. That's been the way it's always been. The way we did cafeteria was we were the only school system that we can find in the entire state that did staffing that way. If this board had not moved the cafeteria to be centralized staffing, to move, you go to this cafeteria, you go to this cafeteria, like everyone else, we would have not only been financially bankrupt in that fund, we would have not been able to serve food. And that's not my statement, that's not my opinion. That's coming from our school director of nutrition saying we would have shut down cafeterias if we had not done what everyone else did. My point with this is we were doing the old school way with the custodians right now. Yeah. And
that's where I think we got to look at. I agree. There's going to be some fallout because some of these communities they're close with their community. They don't leave their community, but at the same time, it's our responsibility to keep our schools clean and maintained. So whatever we got to do, it needs to come under one umbrella. I feel like, and maybe a school does have one dedicated person that they keep there at all times that they want to manage.
Yeah.
But the majority of the people needs to come under one umbrella and be managed by one person. And you got 30, you could use a grandfather clause. You got 30 openings right now. Leave the people that's there. And as you, through attrition, you can hire more and put them as a floater. But you got 30 positions to fill right now. So.
And we've had them posted for how many months? Several months. And we've hired everybody that just about come through the door. And they are told that when we hire them now, which we've never done the hiring before. It's always been at the school level. So we just started that a couple of months back. And they are told you are being assigned to a school, but that is not your home base. You're coming to work for Rutherford County Schools as a custodian, and we will send you where the need is.
What do you think the biggest problem area is? Is it mopping floors, cleaning bathrooms, or emptying trash cans? What is it they don't like to do?
Who doesn't like
the custodians?
It's work.
It's just the physical
It's the
work
same thing.
What was that, Trey?
Work. They're scared of work. Now, I'm not saying our current ones
Let's preface
are.
that by saying not all custodians.
No, I'm not saying our current ones. I'm saying the ones that we're getting.
I have a couple of bloopers.
We just recently had 2 days of training with our lead custodians with Froyland. And what that training was for was how to strip and wax and what you should and should not be doing. We had every school in this district doing something different.
Mm-hmm. I can see that.
Some most inefficient things, I'll take a classroom. They'd move the furniture to one half of the classroom. They would strip and wax a half a classroom. Then they'd move the furniture to that half and strip and wax a half a classroom. The way to strip and wax a floor is to take all the furniture and sit it in the hall and strip and wax the whole
Go ahead
floor.
and name schools. Go ahead while you're at it. Go ahead.
We don't like to do it that way.
But so we have this is what, we've also had a lot of schools purchase dry strippers, which that's okay. They're a useful tool when you get in a bind. But they're not intended to be used every year. We've got some schools that their floors haven't been stripped. Now, they've been waxed, but they haven't been stripped in 10, 12, 15 years.
Wow.
And we're mandating, I guess for lack of a better term, you're going to strip and all the way down to the tile at least every other year.
Most of your commercial buildings you go into now, like Kroger, for instance, it's just a concrete floor that's been stained.
Correct.
Been sealed.
Correct.
And all you got is a machine you ride around
That's correct.
And clean.
And that's where we're trying to get to with our new school. We're doing LVT. There is no strip and wax on the LVT.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if we.
I'm not opposed to stained concrete.
How expensive would it be to change them to LVDT? I know.
Are you talking about our existing school?
Yeah.
No.
Probably $3 to $5 a square foot.
How much?
$3 to $5 a square foot.
What are we spending on stripping, waxing,
What
and
are
doing
we
all that
not,
stuff?
what is it costing us to maintain it when we're not maintaining it?
Say over 5 years.
Well, they're still getting the product, but that's another story. That's a good, I can tell you how much we spent in wax and stripper because we just purchased it all and started shipping it out to the schools a couple of weeks ago.
It'd be a good analysis just to run to see if there's some kind of cost justification.
I'm sure in probably 3 to 5 years it'd pay for itself to go to LVT.
It would be one of those big purchases as opposed to over time.
Yeah.
That's the issue.
You would be, if it was and I'd have to verify the numbers, but LVT right now is about VCT is about $1.50. So you're going to spend that to take it up. And then LVT, $3 to $4 a square foot, but I'd have to reprice it because everything's gone up so much in the last 7-8 months. So you're $1.50 to take it up and another $3 to $5 to put it down. So that's when. So in elementary is 132,000 square feet. Take out the gym and a couple of other spaces, somewhere around 100,000 square feet times $6. So you're looking at $600,000 for an elementary.
You couldn't do them all at one time, but you could do 5 this year, 5 next year, spread it out.
Okay, so, I'm going to, I don't disagree. So we're going to spend that. If we did 5 at $500,000, that's $3 million. That's going to come out of our 177 fund,
That's HVAC.
which is $7 million. So that $200 million number that we're getting 7 for is now cut to 3. I'm not disagreeing with the problem we have. We had this conversation yesterday, did we not, about painting hallways?
Yes,
You asked me, Smyrna High School, why are we only painting certain hallways? I said we spent $40,000 to paint this section or these sections of hallways. And you said, why did you not stay here and do that? And I said, we'd spent a couple $100,000 painting Smyrna High. Well, it'd be better than going on. I said, okay, so I'm going to spend $200,000 here. I get $1 million or $1.3 million, somewhere in that range that's in this budget to paint and do all the other things that we do. Fix the commodes, change the filters, all these things that we do, we get a little over $1 million. Well, if I painted Smyrna High and 3 others, I've spent my $1 million and I don't have any money to do anything else. So what we're trying to do, Mr. Spurlock and Doug and I, we're sitting over here trying to figure out how did you split up $1 million amongst 50 schools and then take $7.5 million to do $200 million as best we can.
We're talking about a machine that's consistently breaking, essentially. We're having to repair it in real time, and there's not enough to go around.
Yes. And some schools have done really good. Their custodians have been very efficient. The administration at those schools has made it a point. Clean schools, paint walls. Other administrators have not.
I will say, I'm going to go on a limb, 98% of our schools do that. You go in the school, it is.
Yes.
It's nice, it's a peak.
It is. I mean, yesterday, every school we walked in was very presentable.
Oh, they absolutely did a wonderful job. I mean,
And I was even impressed that Dr. Hatcher didn't even tell her employees it was coming.
Yeah, she did not.
So, I mean, it made you feel like that's the way that school is anytime you walk in down there, and she's short custodians. I couldn't tell that she was short. But these hard to place, these hard to fill jobs in these certain school areas, maybe that's some of the ones we look at first, how we can transition over to a easier maintenance program or custodial program. And our problem is, just like we've always talked here, we've got an outdated funding mechanism here trying to keep up a very large school system. And yeah, what the state's trying to do is help, but it's never going to be enough. Our need is much greater than our funds. And it's no one's fault sitting here. That's just the way it is. It's the facts.
But we are gradually trying to get to that centralized custodial, because we have a supervisor. We're finding product, $125,000 worth of wax and strippers scattered around the school system that he found, and we're going to distribute it and make sure it all gets used up this year. That's product that in the past probably would have, I don't want to guess where it went. But that's things that, it's a first step, and we're trying to get there. But to answer your question, we're trying to move them around where we can. We're looking at, we've got continual positions posted for custodians when they come in. They are being told you're a Rutherford County Schools employee, and we're going to send you where the need is.
Yeah, that needs to be.
And then the schools that will help us when we go to those principals, and you want to name a name, if I went to Blackman High today and said, I need a custodian to go over to Blackman Middle, no questions asked. That principal would say, no problem, how long do you need them? And they would pick somebody out and they would send them over there, and that'd be the end of it. Other schools, we don't. And I'm not pointing fingers, it just is what it is.
Well, and a lot of them are not as located
They're not, that's not.
centrally as that is.
I don't disagree.
Some of it too as well. But
Some, yes, and I'll leave it at that.
I can see each principal wanting definitely control at least one or two at all times, because they have spills, they have accidents.
Yes,
You know, students have issues, and they've got to.
and that's what we try and do. We try and pick where, I wouldn't want to take one from an elementary that's got 4 to send to a high school that had 8. Now, they're down 2, but they still got 8.
Right.
But where they are at Laverne is, they're down much more than 8. I mean, they're not, they don't have 8. They're down 3 or 4. And in a large high school, you get down 3 or 4. That's like being down 1 at an elementary in comparison.
well,
So
you
we-
pick and choose what you do, and some things are just not going to get done. You got your majors
Yes.
and your minors.
And that's what we've been helping them do. Foreland goes around and helps, it says, right now you're gonna, the teachers are gonna help us by empty the trash. We'll bring a cart down through there. The teachers empty the trash. We'll take care of the floors. That's a mechanism that we're trying to get by. But there are some schools, I know principals are cleaning the bathrooms.
That would be a good thing for in-school suspension kids to do, learn some responsibility, let them empty some trash cans and mop some floors, and,
It'd be a great idea, but we can't do it. Can't do
The
that.
parents sign off.
well, it's a shame, because that's how you teach responsibility and accountability.
There's a portion of state law that you're not allowed to do any type of physical or any type of thing, new state law.
Yeah. There's our problem.
It's always.
Trey, can I ask you one question about bus routes? How many total buses, do you know that number? If
How
not,
many
it's okay.
bus contractors or how many routes?
Routes, total routes now?
Tell you what we've got.
We added 7, so we ought to be somewhere around 310
We've got
routes.
240, for regular, we have 247, and we're adding 7 to that. And then we've got,
So it'd be 254 regular.
then the 41 is the current adding the additional.
41 for SPED.
Thank you.
In adding that. One thing before we get off this right here, on that increase for the bus contractors, if you notice on that line, it also says fuel price adjustment. Per their contract, once diesel goes over, and this goes back to the inflation part of this budget, of course, anybody pumping gas knows fuel's up. Per their contract, once it goes over a certain amount, they have a fuel price adjustment. They're currently receiving that right now. So there's just over 400,000 in that line for not just to pay the 3% increase per their contract, but also for fuel, the fuel price adjustment for next year. No, I don't know what that's going to do, but based on what we're dealing with right now, that's how I'm budgeting.
We've been paying the fuel adjustment, though, for a while, haven't we?
It's been a few months now
Yeah.
that we've been dealing
We
with
had a discussion in a couple of board meetings back on how you calculate it.
Yes. Learned a lot.
Comes in arrears.
Go through the last little bit of this and then whatever you guys want to go to. One other thing, as far as the payroll, that the last thing on the payroll side is, then we touch on a few big items on non-payroll, but the one last thing was something that came from the salary study committee that this board recommended to be put in there is a $1,000 annual stipend for our SPED EAs. You know, if you're a SPED EA, if you're classified as a SPED EA, and basically it came from, okay, if you stay the course with us through the year, that you would receive an additional $1,000 for the additional duties that a SPED EA does instead of over and above what a regular EA would do. And that's in this budget, and it's just under $500,000 for that cost. But that would be to recognize the additional work the SPED EAs are doing. That concludes that part of it. I want to touch on a few large ticket items on the non-payroll through here. If you look on your itemized budget, on the third page, like I said, we can go drive all through this thing, you guys want, but I mean, I just want to hit the high notes on this, and we have with all the salaries, once again, that's the majority of his labor and benefits. The insurance line items, except for growth, I'm leaving the same, like we discussed last week. As we transition the state, after that first year of enrollment, open enrollment, then we can see what savings there are, or if there, you know, what amount there is after the enrollment changes and the adding of the spouses. One of the big items that you'll see on the third page, 71,100, 449 textbooks. On that third column, the amended 22 current year budget, 1,852,300 for textbooks. That increases to 12,969,954 for the so it's an 11,117,654 increase for textbooks. What that is, and Dr. Sullivan could probably tell you about, there's multiple, what's the term? Go ahead.
Yeah, we have multiple adoptions. So our last big adoption was ELA 3 years ago. They pushed math back. It was supposed to be last year. Math is about to hit us this coming school year. And so when we were looking at our math adoption, I was looking up what BEP funds $79 per adoption. And just for ELA a couple years ago per textbook, you were looking at somewhere between about $120 and $180, depending on the textbook that is chosen. And so per student, you're looking at $100 that's funded locally, that's not funded by the BEP. And of course, we have to go with the bid list the state goes with. That's a common thing that our teachers are picking instructional materials. We're told what instructional materials we have to adopt from the State Department on their textbooks. And so it's hard in a budget process because the actual bid list is not going to be finalized until October of this coming year for us to then implement for the next school year. And so we truly are shooting on what we took the ELA and added percentages based on inflation and what we think it'll be, but we won't have the official list until the end of October for us to even begin looking at.
And I'm working with Dr. Sullivan, and Mark Gulliam, we're looking at an attempt to bring that number down, because once again, different years is different. It was growth this year, but you would not want to just leave $10, $11 million in a budget line that year after year. So that's going to fluctuate. It always has. But I'm going to work with Dr. Sullivan and Mark Gulliam. Thank you. I keep wanting to say Gulliam. But that poor man.
You can say that if you want to, but it's
yeah. But to look at maybe diverting some of this one-time expense to some ESSER funds, also with our BEP growth for this year, utilizing some of it to do a textbook, some of this fiscal year, to keep it off of this, to help try to reduce that total amount. But we'll work on that.
And I will tell you on textbooks, I envision, unless the state pushes them off again, we're going to have several years of real adoptions. Unlike having this break, this coming year's math and CTE, the next one's science, 25, 26 is social studies, 26, 27 is English language arts, and then we don't have another year without an adoption until 27, 28, and that'll be CTE, a smaller one. So several.
Do we get electronic and hard paper traditional?
We do. That is actual, and that is a way that some districts save money, is they do not provide textbooks for every student, but we, every single year, as part of our requirement, it is state law that we have a textbook for every student, and we make sure we have a textbook available. I know not every district does that, but that's what we do because it's a state law.
Some can't do it.
Yeah, some can't afford it, there's no way.
Some students need that actual textbook. Not everybody can operate with electronics.
Now, I will say we are at the kind of realm of whatever the publisher chooses. All of the publishers right now are still doing both. I can envision as printing costs increase, they start to move off, but right now, this math adoption, they are.
We also have, this is in operations of plant, 72, 610, 410 through 434. Or I'm sorry, 415, 434, and 454. That's electricity, natural gas, and water and sewer, our utility bills. Looking at current consumption and the trending, we're going to have an increase in that 72, 610, 415, 434, and 454, with a electric going up, budgeted to go up 5% on an increase. Natural gas, of course, we all know the fuel issues, that's going to be a 25%. That's a conservative increase in natural gas for next fiscal year, and I'll be bringing you an amendment for this fiscal year because we're about to tap the entire budget for gas this year. And then a 12% increase for water and sewer over this current year, totaling, and once again, we gave a modest increase based on consumption last year for this fiscal year. It's just, we're looking at, for just utilities, $975,000 increase for next fiscal year just for utilities. The gas, well, it is what it is. What it is with the sewer and water and the electricity, it's, well, once again, when you have 2,000 more kids and everybody came back from virtual, the good news, it's like I told Ms. Bratton earlier, is our teachers are obviously doing a wonderful job with having almost 50,000 children wash their hands daily because the water usage reflects it. And this goes back to, like we discussed, you know, with when you do, like we did a few years back, maintenance and engineering did work with doing to reduce water usage, going through that and adding different things to reduce the cost and the usage of water. When companies come in and say, we can save you X amount of dollars and you have money to use that for something else, the problem is they're looking at static. You know, when you add in these growth districts, it goes back to the discussion, we need additional money for these other improvements. We need a different revenue stream. Because as you can see with this $975,000 in utility increases in 1 year, it's, yeah, the savings will just turn around and go towards continue all this growth that we're seeing. And yes, we can put an addition to the building, but then you pile in all those kids and staff, and there goes your utilities up. Non-health related insurance increases, I'll be putting that in. I just got that information. So that will be going into this. This is a preliminary increase. We're self-insured.
Where are you at?
This is throughout the budget, and I have not increased this yet. I'm going to put this in. So like I was telling you before, there will be some increases and decreases yet to happen as things come to us. I've got a preliminary increase for non-health related insurance like property casualty, auto, liability. We are self-insured as a county, like most large counties, and we buy, stop loss insurance for anything over 100,000. Then it'll kick in on the liabilities. We currently, in this current fiscal year budget, I'm budgeting $2,279,791 for those non-health related insurance. I've got from County Risk Management our first preliminary increase for those for next year, and that is a 19.62% increase. Sound familiar? And that will equate to about $448,000 in just that insurance. I had Wilson County, my counterpart from Wilson, call me because they're in a risk pool, which a lot of the medium and small counties, once again, they all get together just like they're self-insured, like what we do as a big county. They called over here because they're like, hey, we got a rate increase from our risk pool. We want to know who you guys used for the stop loss. And I told them, well, what prompted this call? They said a 5% increase. I said, well, let me get you what I got. So the point being is, I'll just like we did last time with insurance, health, you know, this is this year. Yes. I wanted guidance from y'all. I'll check to make sure we're in where we're supposed to be. Talk to one of the risk pools. Not saying to go to it, just to say, you know, are we reasonable? Bad meal debt to USDA, you know, as we're changing USDA like we discussed, increasing the bad meal debt write-off in the GPS because that can't go in the cafeteria fund. That's going to be $500,000. That's already included in this budget. I don't want to have you do anything now. We'll have a summer study of this, you know, after to see what we can do, you know, going forward. So, but like I said, based on what we saw pre-pandemic, it was around 300,000. Obviously, there's been 2.5 years no one's paid. Now we're going to go back to, according to the USDA, traditional feeding. And I spoke with Mr. Smith, and we'll be having some, you know, updated meal prices coming before the board shortly. So for next year.
You and I talked about this. Once the board, don't you think the principals need to get out in front on this?
We've already done several things, or I say we, our nutrition department has done several things to prepare for this already. And when we go into summer, yes, we're going to have stuff that's going to be robust. It can't continue like we did in the old days, simply because when we started doing like a time motion study of what with our cafeteria managers, as far as trying to chase people that owed money to our cafeterias, it was getting almost to 10% of their workday for our cafeterias. Average 10%, they were doing nothing but trying to get hold of parents to get balances paid. So that's, once again, that's going to be addressed in the summer committee study and to come back with a recommendation to the board. Let's see. Just one of the other large, another large, like transportation, we talked about the fuel surcharge, the contractor increases. Another thing is, Trey, you want to talk about the transportation? They're looking at about $871,901. It's to go to a wireless camera system. You want to talk about that?
Basically, all our buses have a camera system. We have 3 different systems that are on there now. None of them are anywhere near current. So we've, the last 2 years, been looking at our camera system. Unfortunately, the behavior that's our schools are dealing with carries over to our buses. We're having more and more, trying to be politically correct, more sensitive type things that are happening on buses where we need that video to go forward to be able to deal with these type issues, and these systems are beginning to have a higher and higher failure rate. Plus, we still only have one person, and they all have hard drives, and I'm going to go back, everybody remembers the VHS tapes. It's sort of like that, all of these are. So when a bus driver or a principal or a sheriff's department or anybody requests to look at a video, we physically have to go to the bus to take the hard drive out and put another hard drive in. And I got one, we have one person. They can't get there. We've got a couple of our ladies trained for that. We have some bus drivers that are local in the Murfreesboro area. They'll be glad. They're actually work with us. They'll bring their bus by here. The ladies will go out and swap the video out so that we can get these videos. But they're also beginning to heat, cold. They're in the buses. So I mean, they're electronic devices, and our failure rate is going up exponentially. And we're looking at going to a overhaul of the whole system. This would be a wireless system. It's Wi-Fi. As they pull in to load and unload their children, we could actually download from the schools. It'll be automatic. It'll also come here. It'll take a little time to get it all implemented. It's about a 2-year deal, but we're trying to get about 2/3 of the buses this year and a third next year, because it's becoming more and more problematic.
What's the cost on that?
It's total, $1.1 million is our budgeted. Of course, we have to put that out for bid, but
Can we use any safe school money?
we are looking at, I have talked with Patty and we've reached out to the state and we can. We're going to try and do about $300,000 through the Safe Schools grant. I don't want to get too heavy into that because we've got, still got DVRs and cameras and things like that we're working out of. But I'm trying to utilize the 177 fund and Safe Schools and general purpose to take care of our school cameras and DVRs and that kind of thing. And we can tap into this to help with the buses because it does kind of fall into that category. So that's why it's kind of a 2-year deal. I think I can get some money from Safe Schools 1 year, this 1 year, and then next year we come back at a lesser amount and get the other third and be finished.
Well, if it's a safety issue, can't we use ESSER funds?
Don't know because it's an asset to a building whether we can or we can't. Can we? Okay, maybe I was not aware of that. Then maybe possibly we could, yes. I'll get with Mark.
Safety issue.
There's some options if we can't get everything.
Okay,
There's some options.
okay.
Guys, we can go all through this, but I mean, and like I said, I will have like last year, once we get further in with the final items I'm getting for like insurance, things like that, I'll have that variance by line item greater than 25% for all of you to see. But is there anything that you can think of right now?
Yes, sir.
That you want to talk about?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
And you and I talked about it today. Our employees have received $1,000 from us for the extra work that they have put in during COVID. I would like to suggest that they receive another $1,000 at the end of this year for all of the extra work. This is extra pay for extra work that they have put in. The county employees received $2,000. And there's no reason why our employees cannot receive the same. So I would like for the board to think about giving our employees $1,000 and have it added to the $500 that will come in May, giving them $1,500 extra dollars for the extra work they've done. We didn't pay for planning periods. We didn't do any of that. And I think this would really help to make it known how much we appreciate all they did for us.
And if y'all would like, if that's the will of the board, to have me, I can, and I know this is a workshop and it's not voting, but if y'all would like me to have something to consider, for you to consider next board meeting, I could put that, I've got a placeholder for budget amendments. I've got several for you that we're working up. We could place that before you for this next board meeting, and I would just budget against sales tax increase. I mean, obviously the sales tax is going to be well over that, so we could budget against that. But we're talking about $7 million, around $7 million. If the county commission wants me to, I could go back and pick through all the individual line items, expenditure side, but at the end of the day, where this money's going to come from is the openings that we have right now. And like Ms. Bratton said, these employees are having to do the job of people that we have unfilled positions.
Don't we have ESSER money to retain and replace? Could that not fall under ESSER money?
We're currently utilizing $7 million of ESSER for that first 1,000. I think what we're talking about here is to utilize some of the unexpended funds from openings in GP that would roll to fund balance this year because of just open positions. Is that what I'm understanding from you folks? Okay. But yeah.
Yes.
That's money we saved on the backs of our teachers and our employees, and I don't know, it just seems good and right and ethical to use part of that money that we do have to thank them for all that extra work that they've done. And they say this year was harder than last. It's hard to believe, but they say that. And we need to do at least one more thing to thank them for the extra work.
That'll be in this year's budget, not this one we're talking about, so I will bring a budget amendment.
Thank you, I appreciate that. Dr. Anthony, can you help us with attrition this year? Obviously, we've been through COVID, so our numbers are going to be all over the place. But are we seeing more this year of our teachers leaving? I mean, it seems like every couple of days we're hearing of a principal. Today we learned that Fred Barlow at Rockville Middle is retiring, Dr. Justice. So are we seeing more and more of our teachers and administrators leaving us?
Yes, many are looking at either retirement or alternatives on remote working opportunities that they can do something similar to what's been brought in with the COVID time. So there's some alternate types of work force opportunities that our employees are looking at. And then some are just deciding to stay at home, you know, new families that they've started, so.
Percentage-wise, or do you have those numbers? Maybe you don't this evening, but how high, where are we at in comparison to last year?
Okay, so usually we do it in May, but if you remember at last month's board meeting, I gave you the packet all the way through March the 9th, and then all the resignations we had from March 9th going forward. So we were running about a 94%. And usually by the end of the year, we run about 89.
Okay. Retention?
That's right, retention rate. In that chart, I broke down the classified and the certified. Okay. And I think the date was as of March the 9th.
So with those percentages, then we're better off this year than we were last year.
Usually the number of people show up in May, June, in that time frame. So we'll see that a little bit increase more in May and June. That's why we usually try to do the report at the end of May. But the request was to do it early, which was fine. So that's why I broke it down to August to March the 9th, and then what numbers we gained from people who went ahead and put it in so their schools can post those jobs. So we'll do another update so that we can compare last year's May to this year's May.
But it's fair to say that we're seeing more people putting in to leave this year than we saw last
Earlier, yes.
Yes, okay.
Correct.
Where was heading? Mr. Votary, I have a question for you, or more of a statement, really. I'm very concerned about our salaries, and I know we're doing a lot with a little, and this is not about you at all. I appreciate all that you do. But I have some deep concerns about our salaries across the board, central office staff, administrators. I don't know that we can continue with doing so much with so little for very much longer. And I think that's true in maintenance. I think that's true in every aspect, from EAs. And so I'm saying it to you because you're the money guy, and I know it's a gut punch, but at some point, and I know we're probably too far into this, but I think this board really needs to consider a salary study or something to look at truly compensating our staff appropriately, and I just don't think that we're doing that. So, you know, I talked to some bus contractors, and they have that fuel charge or that fuel increase, and that's a blessing, obviously, for them. But our teachers don't get that, and our you know, if a gallon of milk goes up or a gallon of gas goes up, our bus contractors may be compensated, but our teachers aren't getting mileage to school, and they're spending the same money on gas. They're having the same hits to their pockets. So, and I know everybody's different, contracted and whatnot, but I just have a deep concern about the changing environment and not having enough fundage and money to compensate and pay for all that we need. And I don't know if that, I think on top of a salary study, I think engaging a very healthy, robust engagement with the commission. Walking through the schools was eye-opening yesterday to see the gross disparity between just high schools. Some have a lot, some have not much at all. We're gonna need money, and I know you know this, but I think we need to be very upfront and honest with our county commission and our funding body across the board. And I'm hopeful about this new funding mechanism. I hope it comes through, but on the offshot that it isn't what we want it to be, or it isn't what we expect or are planning for, we still have all these same issues. And I would like to be able to keep our great employees and retain equally great employees when those great employees leave us. And right now I have a concern that we will not be able to do that across the board. So all of that to say, could you at some point, can we get some direction from you, or, you know, do we need to do a salary study board? I don't know. But I'm very concerned, and I think we need to do something different.
I think that's something you could look at. It's TISA, of course. I mean, we're putting a lot on this. And this has been something that's been going for years. That this year, you see how upside down this is, and it goes back to we are needing. It's like I don't think. What would you
jump in there, Rick?
Yeah.
Okay. When you look at even just recently, Williamson County, our pay is better than Williamson County. If we want to put that to that. And Clarksville, Montgomery, and Knoxville, and Hamilton County, with the new funding formula, all right, with that new funding formula, they're not only going to be putting raises as they come available, but the state minimum will be increased over time. And I think they said within 5 to 6 years, a beginning salary in somewhere like here would be in the 50s. You know, so that's the big thing. Really, truthfully, when every salary study that we did to comparable systems of our size was we were investing in the very beginning. In fact, that's where I'm the one that brought the 10 through 16 because I noticed that the minimum with us. We stopped for like 5 or 6 years, okay? But in terms of our teachers and staff, it's pretty doggone good. Now, we will never be able to compete with Williamson County on an administrative index. When you're talking about $800,000 median house cost of a home to $1 million, and you're looking at Rutherford County, you're never going to be able to compete with them. I mean, it is what it is. We can wish that thing, but it's going to be the same thing. But I do think that our salaries, now I will say this, I think looking at some of those indexes in terms of, or levels, if you will, that can be tweaked and needs to be tweaked where there's more emphasis when there is a grade level change that they get, there's a little bit more bump to that. And I think you guys did that with the certified, but you're probably going to have to take a look at the classified in the future.
And if I could say, one of the things that I've kind of been harping on is we do have a great relationship with Nissan, and I know there's a lot of economic impact in this area from them. However, Nissan has been on pilot for the last 25 years. Over those 25 years, we would have gotten about $70 million. Now, that's not enough for us to build a high school. It's pretty doggone close, but $70 million. So they get tax breaks here in Rutherford County. Their headquarters are in Williamson County. They get tax breaks over there, but they still pay the school portion of it. Why are we allowing that? Why is it okay for our students not to get that, and their students are?
Well, I will
Yes,
tell you
ma'am.
this, we tried, and we got our heads handed to us.
Yeah.
We did.
Well, then we need to go back. I mean, there's no reason that they should, I mean, maybe they're not aware of it, but we should get the same thing. I mean, we support them economically here. We support them with staff and everything else here just as well. You know, and we can't continue to fund our school systems on the back of our kids and our teachers. And that's
This
what we're
would be
doing.
we had Ms. Sharp, you hit the nail on the head. I mean, Ms. Spurlock, I spoke with the IDB, spoke with the county commission back in, I had just barely got here and said those same exact things.
Yeah.
It was not just Williamson, it's Chattanooga, Hamilton County. Those large districts do not waive in their pilots, they do not waive the school portion. The county commission decided
And then we
not
need to go
go
back,
that
we need to
route.
get back in front of them. And I think the parents would be saying, why are we allowing this?
Might not be a bad idea to get some.
That's, yeah, exactly, exactly.
I think it would be a good idea to get school board members in front of them. Because, I mean, you're elected officials, and it may, you know, it may be something you want to look at, Doug.
Oh, well, now we can talk, well, we can talk about builders and realtors next if you want to.
That's your state government. Thank you for all the information. We appreciate you going through the budget and line item, lots of good information. Any questions, members of the board? Okay, if not.
Are we sticking with 4% raise? Doug's going, dadgummit, I thought she was going. Then what do we need to do? Oh, I've already spent 2.5 hours with Doug today.
Thank you.